Chapter 591. Chapter 591. How did the Cliff of Broken Hearts do it? Chapter 591. How did the Cliff of Broken Hearts do it? Jiang Hao was surrounded by numerous bubbles as he entered the spirit herb garden. As the bubbles merged, he also witnessed changes in his cultivation values. Starting from 82, they continuously increased to 85, 89, 93. Finally, it stopped at 99. Jiang Hao finally breathed a sigh of relief. This time, he gained a total of 38 blue bubbles again. He had gotten over 100 bubbles in total. It was more than he had expected. However, this also indicated that the benefits brought by the high-grade spirit herbs after achieving the return to Void Realm would be significantly reduced. The next day, Jiang Hao obtained 2 blue bubbles from his courtyard. He then looked at his interface. 6 months are finally up. This time, he would be advancing to a new realm in less than 7 months. It took him half the time than usual. After Kendo left, he had been waiting for Elder Baiji to reclaim the Heaven Lock technique, or for her to at least ask him about it. However, there was nothing. This continued for 2 months. It seemed like no one was paying any attention to him for now. This worked in his favor. Finally, his task of guarding the mountain gate was also completed. A few days ago, he even turned in the task and received more than 1,000 spirit stones as a reward. It was a pleasant surprise. Now, he had 1,300 spirit stones left. To avoid any unexpected visits from Cheng Chou, Jiang Hao instructed the spirit beast to stand guard. He told Cheng Chou and the others to handle anything that came up in the garden for that day. The beast and Cheng Chou would manage things themselves. In his absence, this was how they had always operated. So, there was no need for him to worry. Later, Jiang Hao returned to his room and waited for night time. Advancing during the daytime always seemed troublesome. It was better at night because people rarely visited at night. At night, Jiang Hao prepared everything he needed and began to extract his cultivation and lifeblood. In an instant, he felt an overwhelming influx of spiritual energy and lifeblood into his body. The Hong Meng Heart Sutra circulated madly, and his body was filled with spiritual energy. Jiang Hao could still guide the power and, once everything went smoothly, he could advance to the return to Void Realm. The cultivation method and the steps for advancement were all clear to him. The only thing to be concerned about was unforeseen circumstances. He didn't have books in this regard, so he needed to be flexible. Unknowingly, a purple mist covered Jiang Hao, and the purple cocoon appeared once again. The next day, at the Candlelight Pill Pavilion, Qing Yu was reporting the recent developments to Bu Yi. People are all laughing at us. I heard that their spirit herbs may take root and sprout a month earlier. It's said that they have mastered a new method of growing them. Theirs is in the spirit herb garden of the Law Enforcement Hall. It should have been us. Now, it's almost impossible to cooperate with them even if we spend more spirit stones. We ignored them before, and now we can't reach their level. Those people outside are saying that you missed a golden opportunity because of your stubbornness and chose the muddy heap to grow the spirit herbs in. I can't refute them. I can only avoid them. Qing Yu sounded a bit sour. Clearly, this opportunity should have been theirs, and now it belonged to someone else. A month earlier. Bu Yi was surprised. Won't that affect the quality? It shouldn't. Otherwise, they wouldn't dare to spread the news. Some spirit liquid can help with that, said Qing Yu. Bu Yi lowered his head. He looked regretful. This was a long-term partnership. If they had chosen the other spirit herb garden, they could have benefited a lot. Senior brother, do you regret it? Qing Yu asked softly. Bu Yi sighed inwardly. But what could he do? He silently accepted it. His only choice was to recoup the loss. As long as he advanced to the primordial spirit realm, it was good enough for him. So, there was still a chance. Senior brother, something serious has happened, said an urgent voice. Both Bu Yi and Qing Yu were puzzled. They turned to see a Foundation Establishment Realm disciple rushing in. What's going on? Why are you in such a hurry? Bu Yi asked. It's the Cliff of Broken Hearts, said the disciple. Is there a problem with the spirit herbs at the Cliff of Broken Hearts? Qingyu asked immediately. Had she been negligent in her duties? No, it's not. The newcomer shook his head. Explain, Biyuyi said. The Sea Cliff of Broken Hearts, they've asked us to inspect the spirit herbs. They have completed their task of growing them, stammered the junior. Biyuyi and Qingyu were both shocked. Are you serious? Qingyu found it hard to believe. How could this be possible? It only took them 3 months. Even if they didn't care about the quality, it shouldn't be this fast. These spirit herbs were not like other ordinary ones. They said so, the person said earnestly. Let's go. Let's see for ourselves. Biyuyi didn't hesitate. A short while later, Biyuyi and the others flew to the Cliff of Broken Hearts. Many people noticed them on the way. Some whispered sarcastic remarks behind their backs, while others said it to their faces. The former group had lower cultivation realms, while the latter were quite powerful. However, Biyuyi paid no attention to them. These people probably didn't know what had happened. If the news was true, then he would be making a huge profit. No spirit herb garden had ever grown 3 types of high-grade spirit herbs in just 3 months. Lian Daoji, who happened to see Biyuyi leave in a hurry, said, "Is he going to the Cliff of Broken Hearts? What happened?" After investigating the matter, Lian Daoji found out that Biyuyi spirit herbs were ready at the Cliff of Broken Hearts. He was in disbelief. He followed them to the Cliff of Broken Hearts to confirm. It's impossible. How could this be? I've never heard of such a thing happening before, Qingyu said as she looked at the spirit herbs. These are of such high quality, and they didn't even take so much time. How is this possible? If the Cliff of Broken Hearts was this capable, they would have been famous in the sect by now. Qingyu just couldn't believe it. Some of the spirit herbs bloomed half a month ago, and there are no signs of damage. Who planted them? Biyuyi asked Cheng Cho. It was senior brother Jiang who planted and took care of them, Cheng Cho said. He had no idea this would be such a shock to so many people. Qingyu didn't know what to say. Such high-quality spirit herbs. Qingyu didn't think even the law enforcement hall could pull something like this off in such a short time. She had ignored their offer back then. Now, it seemed like it was the right choice. They were now at the lead. Even if the Cliff of Broken Hearts increased the price for their service in the future, it would be worth it. Biyuyi stood there. He couldn't help but smile to himself. However, he didn't want to be showy. He took out some small items as a gift and gave them to the people in the garden. He wanted them to think that he was a decent senior. That would make things easier in the future. Chapter 592, Demoness. Have you forgotten? Chapter 592, Demoness. Have you forgotten? Outside the spirit herb garden of the Cliff of Broken Hearts, Lian Daoji pounded his fist on a tree trunk. Some of the leaves fell. At this moment, he was filled with regret. He could have had this kind of gain. He was the first to contact Jiang Hao and cooperate with him. The opportunity to do so again had been right in front of him, and he had ignored it. He had considered it a few times before but had always hesitated. In the end, he had given up on the idea. This was the stupidest thing he had done in his life. I should have tried. If I had just made an attempt, it wouldn't have come to this. With a heavy sigh, he calmed himself. There was always next time. His relationship with Jiang Hao was good. He would have other opportunities in the future to cooperate with him. It's better to be kind to such people as much as possible. If I had gotten angry at his spirit pet, things would have been different. After learning that Jiang Hao was not around, he turned and left. He would visit again tomorrow. This was not the time to be concerned about appearances. For the alchemists of the Candlelight Pill Pavilion, being humble was important. Otherwise, they would miss out on many things. Meanwhile, Qingyu was still in a daze as she collected the spirit herbs. She walked to the place where the disciples from the Candlelight Pill Pavilion were gathered. She found the person who had mocked her before and looked at her smugly. She didn't say anything because she didn't have to. The news about the spirit herbs might have reached them already. However, they still had to negotiate further with senior brother Jiang Hao. Fortunately, they had already agreed to a long-term cooperation before, and everything had gone smoothly. She couldn't help but admire senior brother Bu Yi's foresight. Some people were puzzled by Qing Yu's behavior, others looked displeased. Perhaps there were still some people who didn't know that the Cliff of Broken Hearts had already grown their spirit herbs. The next day, Jiang Hao came out of his room. Yesterday, at noon, he had successfully advanced. But to ensure he was in peak condition, he had spent most of the day inside. Fortunately, no one had disturbed him during this time. He used some of his power in the courtyard. The surrounding space became heavy and felt like it was boundless. The return to Void Realm was indeed powerful. It had the power to destroy life. So powerful. The return to Void Realm was the highest cultivation realm he knew about. He had always thought that it would take a very long time to reach it, but now he was only 33 years old. In just 14 years, he had completed a journey of several hundred years. Even a Heavenly Tao Foundation establishment cultivator would take around 20 to 30 years. I don't even know what rank I'd be if I was a top disciple. Senior Sister Yi Yaqing, who ranked 5th, was in the late stage of the Soul Ascension realm. The one ranked 4th was at the peak of the Soul Ascension realm, and the one ranked 3rd was in the early stage of the return to Void realm. I might be around the top 3. Liu Xingchen is also about to reach the Soul Ascension realm. Fortunately, I'm a step ahead of him. Among the spies he knew, no one's cultivation realm surpassed his. He was on par with Haiming now. However, he couldn't provoke him. He had to go overseas first to find Tian Chen, and then see if he could look for Feng Hua. Since he hadn't been able to contact other spies, Haiming was the most important for now. He also had to be cautious of the other spies. Liu Xingchen was fine. He just wanted to sit back and watch the show. It had been a long time since he had seen Senior Sister Ming Yi. He wondered what she was up to. Senior Sister Hua Le wasn't there to keep an eye on him, so they rarely interacted. He watered the heavenly fragrance Dao flower with a bowl of water. He wanted to determine how many days it would take for the bubbles to appear this time. Jiang Hao intended to wait for a few days. He found out that whenever he went to the Spirit Herb Garden, he saw people visiting the place frequently these days. Senior brother Bu Yi proposed that if Jiang Hao ever could take another batch of high-grade spirit herbs, he could contact him at the Candlelight Pill Pavilion. Senior brother Lian Daoji also offered the same thing and even told him not to worry about spirit stones. When the season came, they would immediately send him some seeds. It was not just them. Even other people from the Candlelight Pill Pavilion said the same. Jiang Hao was at a loss. Later, he learned that the spirit herbs had grown too fast this time. It wasn't like this before. The previously planted spirit herbs were known to many people, and they knew how to grow them quickly. However, these herbs were complicated. So, it caused quite a stir. Fortunately, not many people pestered him. At most, they would show their faces and tell him that they looked forward to working with him next time. Jiang Hao couldn't agree easily because it consumed too many spirit stones unless these people were willing to foot the bill for those spirit stones. According to what senior brother Lian Daoji said, it seems he would be okay with paying the whole amount. So, I'll need to think about it, said Jiang Hao politely as he bowed to them. 9 days later, the commotion seemed to subside. In the courtyard, Jiang Hao received 2 blue bubbles. From 7 days to 9 days. The holy medicine still hasn't given any bubbles. Perhaps it'll take close to a month. Jiang Hao did a quick calculation. He might be able to collect 7 bubbles in a month. To advance, he would need to wait for about 2.5 years. For a return to Void Realm cultivator, this speed was quite extraordinary. In the evening, Jiang Hao had just entered the courtyard when he saw a woman inside. "Are you ready?" she asked. Jiang Hao was stunned. He couldn't understand what he was supposed to be ready for. She frowned. "Have you forgotten?" "No. I wouldn't dare forget. It's just that I might need a little time to make some preparations," said Jiang Hao hurriedly. A gentle breeze blew, and Jiang Hao suddenly realized that she was in front of him. Then, a finger pointed at his forehead. There was a strange sensation. A powerful force surged, and Jiang Hao's clothes tugged against his body. Then, the breeze disappeared, and his clothes stopped fluttering. Although nothing had happened, Jiang Hao was quite frightened. She retracted her finger. I will come to find you again at this time tomorrow. If you are not ready to go with me overseas. Hong Yuye didn't complete her words and gradually faded. Jiang Hao breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out they were going overseas for real. One day was enough time to make his preparations. He could go to the law enforcement hall to receive a mission. Then, he would give instructions to Cheng Chou to manage the spirit herb garden in his absence. It was a bit regrettable that the green fish hadn't appeared for a long time, and he couldn't get any news. The next day, Jiang Hao arrived at the task hall in the law enforcement peak. Junior brother, it's been so long since I last saw you. Are you going out? Said the senior who was at the reception. Come, let me introduce you to the recent high-quality missions. The longest one allows a stay outside for 6 months. I especially kept this for you. Since the duration is long, the fee for failure is quite heavy. The senior smiled at him. Jiang Hao was speechless. How much is it for failure? The ordinary one is 2,500 spirit stones if you fail. The mission with a longer deadline is 6,000. But if it is for an extended period of time, you wouldn't have to worry about getting back here and going out again. In the end, Jiang Hao chose the ordinary one. He didn't have to worry about the hassle of going back and forth. Chapter 593. Chapter 593. No, senior brother, can T find another woman? Chapter 593. No, senior brother, can T find another woman? When Jiang Hao left the task hall, he met Liu Xingchen, who looked a bit tired. Junior brother Jiang, it's been a while. Lin Xingchen managed a smile despite his fatigue. Senior brother, have you been busy lately? Jiang Hao asked. Given Lin Xingchen's strength and capabilities, there were only a few things to trouble him to this extent. There was also something off about his aura. A strange malevolence seemed to be lurking around him. His lifeblood was restless, his spiritual aura was unstable, and it seemed like something was corroding his body. Could it be that the 3 of the remnants launched a fatal attack? Jiang Hao felt that it was unlikely. He knew that Liu Xingchen manipulated the remnants to do whatever he wanted. However, his current state was indeed somewhat strange. It seemed like his body, soul, blood, and even his will could be controlled at any moment. Out of curiosity, Jiang Hao decided to appraise him. Another major counterattack. Jiang Hao noticed that there was less information this time. Lin Xingchen might not have thought about the remnant soul's counterattack plans. Or perhaps he had not noticed it. The former was more likely. It had been like this for years. With Lin Xingchen's strength, it was impossible not to notice. Will I miss it again? Liu Xingchen definitely couldn't maintain this state for long. Jiang Hao was going out, so he would miss the great fight for possession yet again. Lately, there have been quite a number of new missions. The task hall was asking about you constantly, junior brother Jiang, said Liu Xingchen. Jiang Hao gave him an awkward smile. He didn't say much. After talking with him for a while, Jiang Hao bid him farewell and left. He headed to the spirit herb garden. Jiang Hao gave some instructions and then asked about Chu Chuan and Lin Ji. Both of them didn't need him to do anything for them for now. One progressed extremely quickly in strength, while the other remained stable as always. The two were following completely different paths. However, they both faced different kinds of pressure. Chu Chuan faced the pressure of matching up to the Bright Moon sect, where Chu Jie was. She might be advancing to the primordial spirit realm by now, while Chu Chuan remained at the Foundation establishment realm. Fortunately, the Bright Moon sect was far away, and Chu Chuan didn't know Chu Jie's strength, so things were okay for now. Lin Ji's pressure came from his fellow disciples and his 2 good friends. Even now, despite having reached Foundation establishment realm, he couldn't catch up to his 2 friends. However, unlike before, he was hopeful. Having experienced the hardships of life and the rules of the sect, he might finally be able to plan things well. Someday, he would become the version of immortal he had in mind and retrieve his safety talisman from the spirit beast. Senior brother Jiang, are you going out again? Xiao Li asked while hugging the beast. She followed behind Jiang Hao. They walked by the stream, where there was no one around. Yeah. Jiang Hao nodded. Will senior sister go with you too? Xiao Li asked. Master, are you going out to find a lady for yourself? Remember to mention my name as the Great Lord Beast. You'll definitely find a lady to suit your taste, said the spirit beast. No, said Xiao Li immediately. It's all good. We already have a senior sister. But Master is so magnificent. It is only natural for him to have more than one lady, said the beast. No. Absolutely not. Senior sister will be unhappy, Xiao Li said as she covered the beast's mouth. Jiang Hao was speechless. These two didn't even ask about what he wanted. They were already planning his partners for him. When they reached the courtyard, Xiao Li and the beast followed him in. Jiang Hao, who had planned to go straight to his room, turned around to give them some instructions. Just as he turned, he saw Xiao Li sneakily approaching the immortal peach tree. Her hand reached out for the fruit. The beast coughed and startled Xiao Li, who quickly retracted her hand and looked around. She looked nervous when she met Jiang Hao's eyes. Jiang Hao was speechless. He couldn't understand why they had to act like thieves when plucking the fruits. He had never stopped them. He turned and walked into his house. Now that he was going overseas, he needed to consider the situation there. The first thing he needed to do was to find Tian Chen's son on the Chaos Stone Island. He would then use him to find out the whereabouts of Tian Chen. On the way, he also wanted to see if there was a true dragon who was suppressed under the island. After that, he would probably go to the Abyssal Sea. The news about the heart of the ancestral dragon had spread everywhere, and strong people overseas would likely be heading to the Abyssal Sea. Liu already knew how to find the heart of the ancestral dragon. They were going to the Abyssal Sea this time, not for the heart of the ancestral dragon, but for the dragon pearl. At least the way Hong Yuya acted showed that she was interested in the abyssal dragon pearl, not the heart of the ancestral dragon. If I have the chance, I can also go see Kai Tian. I don't know how he's doing. However, I need to ask Liu about this. I just don't know when we will meet again. It had been a long time since the last gathering. Logically, there should have been a gathering after Kendo left the Heavenly Note sect. I didn't expect it to take this long. Most likely, Senior Dan Yuan had also gone overseas to find the ancestral dragon's heart. As for the others, Liu was probably still completing his final task. Xing was probably still troubled about figuring out a way to disrupt the formation. Gui had left the Heavenly Note sect. Jiang Hao didn't know where she was. After thinking over many things, Jiang Hao was certain of what he needed to do. Now that everything was ready, he could depart at any time. However, by evening, he still hadn't seen Hong Yuye. Suddenly, he sensed something. His golden ring began glowing. One of the rings was with Hong Yuye. Is she calling me over? Jiang Hao wondered. After hesitating for a moment, he chose to communicate through the golden ring and then disappeared from his original spot. Jiang Hao appeared at the gate of Luo City in the Hidden Cloud Prefecture. At the same time, a red figure also manifested beside him. It seems you're ready now. Yes, Jiang Hao said hastily. Indeed, he was ready. He had checked his treasures again. The primordial heavenly blade, the golden rings, the 9 heavens battle armor, and the immortal mountain sea shield were all accounted for. There was also a spirit tablet from the heavenly spirit tribe. He wanted to see if it would be useful overseas. Then, he took out 2 peaches. He gave one to Hong Yuye. Senior, please try this. Xiao Li gave me some before I left. Hong Yuye was in a red dress that reached her ankles. A red sash cinched her waist. Her long hair was tied up with a hairpin. She looked casual and comfortable, yet very elegant. She stole my peaches again? Hong Yuye asked softly as she accepted the peach. Jiang Hao was unsure how to respond. Xiao Li ate them every year. It was surprising that they were in Luo City. Was she planning to stay here this time? Jiang Hao looked toward the house that used to be his home in the past. He could see the courtyard, but there was no one inside. Chapter 594, Chapter 594, The Last Farewell. Chapter 594, The Last Farewell. The 2 elderly people are gone too? Jiang Hao did not linger here. Instead, He left Luo City with Hong Yuye and headed to Heavenly Earth City. When they reached, Jiang Hao asked Hong Yuye where she wanted to go next, but she remained silent as ever. That meant everything depended on him. This made things a bit difficult because he didn't know which direction he needed to go to travel overseas. He also didn't know how long it would take to go overseas. The only thing worth celebrating was that he was now in the early stage of the return to Void Realm, so he didn't need to follow Hong Yuye to Heavenly Earth City. Instead, Hong Yuye followed him. By using the one heart palm technique, they could disappear from the spot and travel together. After more than 10 years, he had indeed changed a lot. When he had traveled with Hong Yuye for the first time, he was only at the Golden Core Realm. Now, he was at the return to Void Realm. It was truly eye-opening. At Heavenly Earth City, a middle-aged man sat on a chair and sternly reprimanded two young people in front of him. Your punches must be steady. How did you train your bodies? You've been learning basic boxing for so long, but you still can't control it as you wish. Shameful. Truly shameful. If you leave, don't tell anyone that you are my disciples. The two young people looked to be in their early 20s, and they were practicing boxing diligently. They wouldn't slack off for even a bit. I think it's all right, said a sudden voice. All right? This is considered all right? You're too pathetic. When I advance beyond the Golden Core Realm, other seniors will know you are my disciples. If you do better than others, no one will laugh at you, said the man. He then froze. He stood up and looked behind him. A young man was standing there. He could see this young man, but his features were unclear. That meant that the person's strength was extraordinary. How could such a powerful person be here? Friend She, do you remember me? Jiang Hao asked. There was a woman behind him. Disciple Jiang? She Xin recalled something and exclaimed excitedly, Friend Jiang? Is that you? Yes, Jiang Hao said gently. Then, he looked at the two young people next to him, who looked puzzled and worried. It seems you kept your promise. You really took them in as your disciples. One is at the 4th stage of the lifeblood refinement realm, and the other is at the 5th stage already. Not bad. Jiang Hao had met She Xin during his last trip. He had rescued 2 children on the way and handed them over to She Xin. He had come to check on them. He had thought, at the time, that he would come to see them if he reached the primordial spirit realm or the soul ascension realm. Who would have thought he would see them after reaching return to Void Realm? At that moment, the two young people stood still. They looked a bit lost. Why are you still standing there? Don't you talk about your savior every day? Now that he is here, why aren't you paying your respects? She Xin said. The two people finally straightened up. They hurriedly bowed and exclaimed in gratitude. Jiang Hao didn't stop them. After this, they might never meet again. After giving them some guidance and some things to help them on their path, Jiang Hao let them go. Then, he looked at She Xin. There's something I'd like to ask you, friend She. Friend Jiang, you're being too polite. Please tell me what you need. Jiang Hao had come to inquire about the situation overseas. He wanted to know how to sail to the sea. The Heavenly River. It should be in the southeast, but it will take a very long time to reach the sea. Even if you use various teleportation devices, it will still take a considerable amount of time. And you will have to go through different territories, She Xin said. Southeast. Jiang Hao nodded. It was too far. If Hong Yuye didn't lend a hand, it would be a waste of time. Jiang Hao carefully observed She Xin's condition. Are you about to advance to the Golden Core Realm? He was somewhat surprised. In a little over 10 years, he had advanced from the late stage of the Foundation Establishment Realm to the brink of the Golden Core Realm. That was fast, especially since She Xin had no background and lacked resources. Yes. I'm just missing an opportunity, She Xin said somewhat awkwardly. He hadn't found that opportunity yet, so he didn't dare to advance rashly. Let me share my understanding of the Golden Core Realm with you, Jiang Hao said calmly. She Xin was overjoyed. Jiang Hao then began to explain the Golden Core Realm to him. For his own advancement, Jiang Hao relied on his cultivation base and lifeblood. Even after advancing, he continued to explore so that when teaching Cheng Chou and others, he would not make mistakes. Moreover, the more he understood each realm, the less likely he would be to encounter accidents during his own advancement. This was something he never dared to neglect. As he explained, Shashin's eyes lit up. Then, instinctively, he took out a heaven-rejuvenating pill and began to advance. Jiang Hao didn't say much. He left a defensive formation behind and turned to leave. Outside the courtyard, Chen Baixiao, the head of a famous family in Heavenly Earth City, led his men to the courtyard. Are you sure that Shashin has a heaven-rejuvenating pill and can advance to the Golden Core realm at any time? He didn't like having such a strong cultivator out of his control, so he came to test him. That's right, but Shashin is friends with the powerful person from before. It might not be appropriate for us to intervene, Chen Quan said worriedly. He still remembered when he was cut down by a single strike of the blade in the inn. That person doesn't matter. The Heavenly Earth City is still under our control. Shashin will understand, Chen Baixiao said sternly. Boom. Suddenly, a powerful aura soared into the sky. It seemed like the power was changing. What is this? Chen Baixiao was shocked. Is Shashin advancing to the Golden Core realm already? The aura wasn't hidden. It was unleashed with full force. He was truly bold. Chen Baixiao walked in. He wanted to see where Shashin got his confidence to do something like this. However, in the instant he stepped in, a figure walked past him. The person glanced at him. It was just a casual glance, but it made him break out in a cold sweat. He felt frightened and insignificant. This was probably a very powerful immortal. But the person didn't linger. He left. This time, when Chen Baixiao looked at the courtyard again, he found Shashin and his two disciples meditating. One was advancing, and the other two were contemplating. They all had a defensive formation on them. He wouldn't be able to break this defense even with the strength of 100 men like him. Chen Baixiao broke out in a cold sweat. He feared the immortal who had just left. What if he turned around at the last minute and struck him? Chen Baixiao felt powerless. He was scared. Chen Quan, beside him, looked around. He had no idea what had just happened. Clan leader, what's wrong? Jiang Hao glanced back and shook his head slightly. There was no need for him to take action against these people. However, this farewell would likely be the last. Chapter 595. Chapter 595. From now on, I will be unbridled, arrogant, and unrestrained. Chapter 595. From now on, I will be unbridled, arrogant, and unrestrained. They had left the sect around mid-August. Now, it was already early September. During this half-month, Jiang Hao mostly followed Hong Yuye. At first, they often appeared in some cities in the Hidden Cloud Prefecture. After leaving that prefecture, their pace changed. They even crossed half a province in one go. They arrived at a coastal city. It was the Heavenly Sea territory, from where they could set off. They could also inquire about the general situation of the Heavenly Sea territory here, and more importantly, understand the current situation. It would be convenient for their future actions. This was a coastal city where one could see the endless sea from within the city. It seemed boundless, like a massive beast. It was mysterious and vast. The sea was clear and blue. Jiang Hao chuckled inwardly. Then, he looked at the figure beside him. Senior, do you plan to stay on the sea or on land tonight? He had asked around earlier. There were places to stay both on the sea and on land here. This was a city mostly inhabited by cultivators, so it was understandable that the architecture was unique. It just required spending more spirit stones. Currently, he lacked spirit stones, but he wasn't worried. He had plenty of things he could sell here. After settling Hong Yuye in her room, he could look for suitable buyers. What do you think? Hong Yuye turned toward Jiang Hao. Her clear gaze made Jiang Hao feel like he had all her attention. Finally, he rented a house on the shallow sea. It floated on the surface like a small island. It was beautiful and peaceful, but expensive. It cost 10 spirit stones a night. Even with his current Golden Core realm resources, he couldn't afford to stay here for half a month. The room was beautiful. One could see the sea and the sun as soon as one got up. The scenery was beautiful, and there was a good amount of spiritual energy here too. There was also a defense formation in place. Senior, please rest. I'll inquire about how to get to Chaos Stone Island, Jiang Hao said after preparing some tea. They had consumed quite a bit of tea on this trip, so he needed to replenish it later. Hong Yuye sat upright on the chair and looked at Jiang Hao. What cultivation realm are you in now? Primordial Spirit Realm? Senior, you must be joking. As I mentioned before, I am at the early stage of the Golden Core Realm, Jiang Hao said. You're quite strong for someone at the early stage of the Golden Core Realm. Realm Cultivator is your match, right? No matter how strong, it's not as effortless as a wave of your hand, Senior Jiang Hao said cautiously. He had advanced too fast, and sometimes it was a dangerous thing. Now that we've arrived at the coast, what identity do you plan to use? Asked Hong Yuye. The identity of Smiling San Sheng, Jiang Hao said. He had decided that from the beginning. Later, he would wear the mask and become San Sheng. For authenticity, I may offend you a bit. I hope you can understand, Senior Jiang Hao said apologetically. Smiling San Sheng was unpredictable and didn't distinguish between good and evil. To resemble him, Jiang Hao had to put up an act. However, if Hong Yuye didn't agree, there was nothing he could do. After all, staying alive was more important. But unexpectedly, Hong Yuye readily agreed. All right. But after that, you're on your own. Jiang Hao was speechless. It probably won't be fatal. As long as he didn't die, things would be much easier to handle. After all, Hong Yuye still needed him to do things, so she probably wouldn't kill him. At most, he would lose his freedom, suffer some injuries, or be restrained. He could accept all of that. Do you want some pastries to go with the tea, Senior? Jiang Hao asked. When she didn't reply, he got up and left. Then, I won't disturb you, Senior. The moment he walked out of the room, a fan appeared in his hand. She smiled sinisterly. He then transformed into a scholar. He smiled and flew away. He didn't deliberately hide his cultivation at the return to Void Realm and didn't flaunt it either. He was fearless and indifferent. In a short while, Jiang Hao landed in the marketplace. He strolled casually on the street and stopped to inspect some things. He would occasionally ask the vendors some questions and then move on. When he saw a relatively large magic treasure shop, he didn't wander aimlessly anymore but went inside. However, there were quite a few people here, and everyone was lining up. Jiang Hao quietly waited in line. Suddenly, a bald head almost bumped into him, but he managed to avoid it. The person rushed past him accompanied by 2 followers. When the man passed by him, he spat and cursed. Get lost, you scum. Normally, Jiang Hao wouldn't pay attention and would let it slide, but right now, he was Smiling San Sheng. So, he had to speak up. Excuse me, sir with the bald head in front, please wait in line. The others were all stunned. Some were frightened. At this moment, the bald man turned to look at Jiang Hao. Are you calling? Are there any other bald people in front of me? Jiang Hao smiled gently. The bald man sneered. What do you want? Please line up, Jiang Hao said. The people around became even more anxious. They thought Jiang Hao was just a newcomer who didn't know how things ran here. The bald man laughed. Line up. Why would I line up? Because we're all in line. Jiang Hao still maintained a warm smile. The bald man frowned. Go. Cripple his cultivation, cut off his limbs, and hang them outside to dry. Don't kill him easily. Let him know that without strength, he's not even a person in front of me. In an instant, the people around Jiang Hao retreated a bit. At the same time, the 2 followers quickly moved and attacked Jiang Hao with their powers. They unleashed a strike. However, before it could land, Jiang Hao's figure disappeared. Someone screamed. The 2 followers were astonished and looked behind them. Their master had been stabbed in the stomach. And standing in front of the bald man was Jiang Hao. I kindly reminded you to line up, but you wanted violence. Jiang Hao smiled amiably. The blade transformed back into a fan in his hands. Everyone was dumbfounded. Even the steward who was about to greet the bald man stood frozen in place. Not lining up still? Are you injured? I already reminded you, said Jiang Hao. The bald man clutched his stomach and glared at Jiang Hao. However, something stabbed into his eye. The bald man fell to the ground in agony. That kind of look can offend people easily. Let me help you get rid of it. Perhaps you'll live a few more years. Jiang Hao's mouth curled up in a sinister smile. The people around him instinctively retreated. No, no. Please stay in line, said Jiang Hao. The others queued up again in fear. Die, shouted the bald man, and his red aura erupted. He wanted to crush Jiang Hao. However, Jiang Hao moved the fan in his hand slightly, and the blade flashed again. The bald man, who had just unleashed his power, was suspended in midair. Then, layer by layer, he fell apart. He was dead. So noisy, said Jiang Hao casually and lined up again. At that moment, no one dared to act rashly. Even the employees and staff of the shop were trembling in fear. They were afraid they might offend this individual who had popped up out of nowhere. Wasn't he afraid of attracting the wrong attention by acting so boldly? Chapter 596, Chapter 596. You guys are really wicked. Chapter 596. You guys are really wicked. While waiting in line, Jiang Hao noticed that people at the front and behind were looking around. They looked afraid of something. It seemed that the bald man from earlier had made these people afraid due to his background. But how could smiling San Sheng be afraid of something like this? He continued to wait in line. After some time, it was finally his turn. Senior, what can we help you with? Said the woman at the counter. Do you accept magic treasures here? Jiang Hao smiled. We do. The woman nodded. How about this spirit sword? Jiang Hao took out a regular spirit sword. The woman looked at the sword with some difficulty. They didn't accept this kind of spirit sword usually. But she couldn't say that out of fear. This spirit sword costs 4 spirit stones each. We'll accept whatever amount you have, friend, said a sudden voice. It was a middle-aged man who walked over. He had an extraordinary demeanor. His cultivation realm was at the late stage of the soul ascension realm. The man escorted Jiang Hao somewhere inside. The people in the hall let out a sigh of relief. Many decided that it was not wise to stay here longer than they needed to. A man immediately pulled the woman beside him and left. Brother, why are you in such a hurry to leave? Don't you know? The 100 Weapons Tower has a close relationship with the Blood Dragon sect. The person who was just killed was the Hall Master of the Blood Dragon sect. There will surely be retaliation. The man who took that person inside is one of the 3 powerful experts of the 100 Weapons Tower. If he really wanted peace, he would have asked us to leave long ago. I think he just invited that person inside to stall for time till the Blood Dragon sect arrives. This place will become a bloodbath. We need to go. Isn't that just a tad bit exaggerated? I feel that person acted so recklessly because he is someone important. I haven't seen him before. He is probably from outside. But even if he is powerful, he needs to be careful. Such arrogance will lead to disaster. The 2 of them talked as they left. They didn't dare linger here. Jiang Hao was taken to an elegant room with calligraphy and paintings around. In the center, there was a simple tea table. Friend, please have a seat, said the middle-aged man and smiled. I am Zheng Xuanzhen. I am smiling San Sheng, Jiang Hao said with a friendly smile. Zheng Xuanzhen felt like he had heard that name somewhere but couldn't recall where. Friend, how many magic treasures do you want to sell? We'll take them all. Jiang Hao took out 3,000 spirit swords. Zheng Xuanzhen was surprised. It was much more than he had expected. All right. He nodded with a smile and then asked if there was anything else. Jiang Hao looked at him and took out a halberd. This was a spiritual treasure of the primordial spirit level of good quality. He had estimated that its value exceeded 10,000. A halberd. Zheng Xuanzhen took the treasure and examined it with furrowed brows. The quality of this magic treasure is good, and logically, the price will not be low. But the halberd is used by very few people, so it might not be easy to sell. So, we might not be able to give you much for it. If the price is too low, I'm sure you might not want to sell it, right, friend? How about this? I'll go ask my senior upstairs whether he wants this. To reassure you, I'll pay the full price for the spirit swords, and 5,000 as deposit. Saying this, he called for someone to give Jiang Hao 17,000 spirit. Jiang Hao agreed to this. Afterward, Zheng Xuanzhen took the halberd and left. Jiang Hao narrowed his eyes as he watched him leave. Zheng Xuanzhen went to the upper floor. He knocked on the door, and someone led him in. Inside was an elderly man with white hair. His cultivation was at the peak of the soul ascension realm. "What's the matter?" he asked Zheng Xuanzhen. "That person wants to sell this. I pretended to come here to ask you about it and left him waiting downstairs." Zheng Xuanzhen took out the halberd and placed it on the table. "He doesn't seem to know how things work here. He is probably thinking, well, come downstairs and offer him more. He doesn't understand that with strength and brute force, one also needs to use their brain." "What if no one from the Blood Dragon sect comes?" asked the elderly man. "In that case, I will go down and buy at the price originally agreed. I'll inform him that the initial price was 13,000, and I can buy it for 14,000. If he's not satisfied, I'll add 1,000 more. Then, I'll hesitate for a while, nod in agreement, and he will feel like he got quite the bargain. But if someone from the Blood Dragon sect comes, that's even better," said Zheng Xuanzhen. "When Blood Dragon sect arrives here, they will owe us a favor. Even if he escapes, we'll be able to earn 5,000 spirit stones for such an important treasure. He already has an extra 5,000 in his hands, so he might not take the risk of coming here if he escapes. I hope the Blood Dragon sect kills him. That way, we'll benefit more." The two exchanged a smile. "You guys are really bad," said a voice. The two instinctively wanted to explain. They wanted to survive, after all. However, in just a moment, they sensed that something was wrong. They were horrified. When did someone else enter the room? Zheng Xuanzhen wanted to get up, but a fan was pressed against his neck. "Friend Zheng, why the rush to get up?" Jiang Hao's voice was friendly, as if speaking to a long-lost friend. "Friend, this is a misunderstanding." The moment Zheng Xuanzhen saw Jiang Hao, he broke out in a cold sweat. He had no idea when Jiang Hao had reached here. "Really? A misunderstanding? I don't think there is anything like that." Jiang Hao shook his head. "I'm actually too kind for my own good. That's why it hurts me to see how bad you all can be. Friend, Zheng Xuanzhen wanted to explain. However, the fan pierced his neck. "I guess it's better if bad people just die," said Jiang Hao softly. Zheng Xuanzhen covered his neck. He was filled with fear and despair. Instinctively, he wanted to use his cultivation to stop the bleeding and mend the wound. But it was of no use. His power was disrupted and was unable to function. His primordial spirit seemed to have ignited into a blaze and burned everything. He fell to the ground and looked at Jiang Hao in pain. He hoped he would be spared. He only saw that gentle and sinister smile on Jiang Hao's face. The smile made him feel queasy. It was terrifying. His consciousness began to fade. Jiang Hao moved the fan and walked to the elderly man who was at the peak of the soul ascension realm. The man had wanted to leave but couldn't move his body at all. "Senior, I have a few questions I'd like to ask you. I wonder if it's convenient for you?" The man remained silent. "Not convenient." The fan moved, and a severed arm flew into the air. "It is convenient," said the old man in fear. He was suppressed by the person in front of him. He could neither move nor speak properly. He had merely complied with Zheng Xuanzhen's request. He hadn't done anything at all. Yet, he had to face such terrifying consequences. "Then, I'll start with the questions," Jiang Hao said softly. The elderly man broke out in a cold sweat. The more polite this person seemed, the more terrified he felt. Chapter 597, Chapter 597. Yeah, 11M provoking you. Chapter 597. Yeah, 11M provoking you. The people from the Blood Dragon sect had arrived. Amidst the fearful gazes of those around, they stepped into the 100 Weapons Tower. They headed straight to find Zheng Xuanzhen. Bang! The door banged open. The middle-aged man in the lead froze in place. Zheng Xuanzhen lay on the ground. He was dead. The elderly man was still alive, but both his hands were severed. He looked terrified. The middle-aged man in the lead felt nervous seeing them like this. "Where is the culprit?" he asked angrily. But no one answered him. "Spread out and check the room. Find out who did this," he ordered. Shortly after, a young man reported to him. "Vice Sect Master, I found a strange smiley face." "A smiley face?" The man walked over and saw a smiley face on the table. It looked like it was smiling and crying at the same time. He frowned. He had seen something like this before. He then had someone tend to the elderly man's injuries. He wanted to know what had happened here. In this city, it had been a long time since anyone dared to openly kill their people. Jiang Hao had already left. He now sat calmly in the inn. He drank his tea and took stock of his gains. Although smiling San Sheng was arrogant, he wasn't a fool. When besieged by too many opponents, leaving was the wisest choice. He already had a lot of information and had also earned a lot of spirit stones. He had 17,000 spirit stones now, along with the halberd and 2 storage treasures. The people in this city are quite wealthy. In Zheng Xuanzhen's storage treasure, there weren't many treasures or spirit medicines, but there were 38,000 spirit stones. This was the wealthiest Jiang Hao had seen so far. I wonder where he hid the treasures and spirit medicines. Other than the spirit stones, everything else in the storage treasure was quite ordinary. Talismans, techniques, arrays, and so on. The person at the peak of the Soul Ascension realm was different. He had 2 impressive treasures, a 3-point double-edged blade of primordial spirit level and a sledgehammer of Soul Ascension realm level. Both could be used. There were also some pills and other miscellaneous items, but their value wasn't that high. As for the spirit stones, there were just over 9,000. Compared to Zheng Xuanzhen, it was quite less, but overall, the value of the treasures should exceed Zheng Xuanzhen's. It's done. Jiang Hao couldn't help but sigh. He now had 65,365 spirit stones. This trip was truly worthwhile. Unfortunately, he didn't see a storage treasure on the bald man that he had killed. Otherwise, it could have surpassed 70,000. It seemed like a lot of spirit stones, but it still wasn't enough. He had asked the elderly man and found out that a ticket to the Chaos Stone Island cost around 50,000 spirit stones. If he went to buy from some second-hand resale channels, it would cost at least 80,000 per ticket. He couldn't understand these people. How can a ticket be so expensive? What kind of person could afford it? He had a way to buy the ticket now, and he had already found out where to board. It wasn't here but on a remote island. The ticket was the entry permit to the island. Jiang Hao saw many people flying in the air outside. They seemed to be looking for something. Blood Dragon Sect. He had a rough understanding of the bald man's background now. The Blood Dragon Sect was not a sect located in the city. They only had a branch here. The strength of the branch's Vice Sect Master was at the middle stage of the return to Void Realm. Jiang Hao was somewhat surprised that in such a large city, the strongest was only at the return to Void Realm. This was just the outskirts of the overseas region. Strong cultivators would probably be gathered in the Central Sea area. But I can't entirely believe this. If the strongest is only at the return to Void Realm, wouldn't an individual in Immortal Ascension platform take away all their resources? Jiang Hao shook his head and brushed off these thoughts. The easiest way to obtain a ticket is through the Blood Dragon Sect, but I don't have enough money now. I have to go sell some things and then make the trip. He planned to buy the ticket today. In the afternoon, he continued selling things he had. He planned to visit the Blood Dragon Sect tonight to buy the tickets. As for the matter of the ancestral dragon's heart, the senior had no knowledge of it. He felt a bit disappointed. But it was not a big deal. There were many people he could ask later. At night, in the Blood Dragon Sect's main hall, several people were seated. "You still haven't found him?" asked a man in a dark red robe. The high-ranking members of the Blood Dragon Sect were openly killed, and they still hadn't found the culprit. For them, it was a thing of great shame. It affected their control in the city. "Not yet, but it is rumored that he is smiling San Sheng," said the burly man who had gone to the 100 Weapons Tower before. Smiling San Sheng? Who's that? Many people had never heard this name. Me. Just as the burly man was about to explain, the door slowly opened. A man in white robes, who was holding a fan, stepped in. Someone had approached silently and listened to all their conversation without them knowing. It startled everyone. At this moment, everyone except the leader remained seated. The others stood up and were on their guard. Jiang Hao looked at the 7 or 8 people in front of him. He was unfazed. He looked directly at the man in the center. He wore a blood-red robe, and his body was as robust as a wild animal. Elder Xuehu. Smiling San Sheng. You know of me, said Jiang Hao. Sorry. I'm very forgetful. I don't know your names, elders. That's all right. We haven't met. Just heard about you from somewhere. Are you here to annihilate our entire sect? Xuehu looked at the man in front of him. The Heavenly Sea region was vast. It is divided into 12 heavenly domains. Very few people knew about Smiling San Sheng. The reason Xuehu knew about him was because he had visited the southern region and had heard his name. As far as he knew, this person was mad. He couldn't be understood by common sense. He did what he pleased. This person addressed him as elder. He was indeed bold. The others were apprehensive. However, they saw that Smiling San Sheng was only at the early stage of the return to Void Realm. They thought the sect master was mocking Smiling San Sheng by asking whether he was here to annihilate their sect. Smiling San Sheng, you killed our hall master in public. Are you provoking us? A woman asked. Yeah. Do you have any objections to that? Jiang Hao smiled with narrowed eyes. You. This answer left everyone at a loss for words. Our hall master Chen was just passing by, and you struck him mercilessly. Isn't that a bit overdone? Asked another person. He didn't line up. Isn't that rude? Jiang Hao said. Why should he line up? Because everyone was lining up. Even if he was wrong in what he did, he should have been handed over to our Blood Dragon sect for judgment. What authority does an outsider like you have to pass such a judgment? Asked a young man angrily. Jiang Hao used the fan to prop his chin up. He looked like he was actually reflecting on his past actions. Then, he moved the fan a bit. There was a flash of the hidden blade. The young man was startled. He tried to defend with all his might. However, his defensive treasure shattered before the blade, and his technique disintegrated. Someone tried to help, but they couldn't stop the blade from slashing through his neck. In an instant, the head was severed from the body. After that, Jiang Hao unfolded the fan and gently waved it twice. I would much prefer it if children didn't interrupt when 2 adults are speaking. Chapter 598, Chapter 598, Unrivaled in the World. Chapter 598, Unrivaled in the World. Smiling San Sheng, they watched their fellow sect members die before their eyes and were furious. They did not retreat. At this moment, everyone knew that most of them were not a match for Smiling San Sheng. No one knew who would be next. If they didn't unite against him and show some strength, they would be picked off one by one. They couldn't retreat. Smiling San Sheng, did you come here just to kill people? Xuehu asked. He glared at the scholarly-looking young man fiercely. However, he couldn't guess what the person was thinking. Jiang Hao smiled and shook his head. Of course not. I came here to make a deal. What kind of? Jiang Hao's gaze silenced the one who was asking. The person thought carefully. Was he also a child in front of Smiling San Sheng? He decided to consider himself as one. So, he lowered his head and remained silent. What kind of deal? Xuehu asked and looked at Jiang Hao. I want to buy 2 tickets from the sect master, Jiang Hao said. Tickets? Tickets to go to Chaos Stone Island. Xuehu fell silent. Jiang Hao fanned himself. The words, Smiling San Sheng, were visible on the fan. 70,000, Xuehu said. 70,000? Jiang Hao shook his head. I'm afraid that won't do. How much do you want it for? Xuehu asked coldly. 80,000. Jiang Hao stopped fanning himself. In an instant, The entire hall seemed to fall silent. No one understood what kind of bargain this was. Jiang Hao closed his fan. 4-2 tickets. Boom. The entire hall erupted with an overwhelmingly powerful force. After a while, Lian Hao walked out of the hall with 2 tickets in perfect condition. He lightly waved his fan and swept away the surrounding dust. At that moment, his fan displayed the words, "All things return to one." However, Jiang Hao didn't feel quite right about it. Soon, the words "all things return to one" disappeared and were replaced by another 4 words. "Unrivaled in the world." Smiling San Sheng laughed as he left the Blood Dragoon sect. Inside the hall, someone said in dissatisfaction, "Are we just letting him go like this? Then, what should we do?" Shuehu wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. The mere thought of the opponent's calm demeanor and smile made him feel uneasy. Smiling San Sheng, a person with no apparent weaknesses, acted unpredictably. Such a person was too dangerous to provoke. It was best to avoid too many interactions with such a person. Jiang Hao returned to the inn and reverted to his original appearance. He finally breathed a sigh of relief. Today had been too dangerous. He had killed many people in the day and infiltrated the Blood Dragon sect at night. Fortunately, he had made his preparations. When Shuehu made his move, the power of the middle stage of the return to Void Realm made Jiang Hao feel uneasy. Fortunately, the reappearance of the hidden spirit was ready. It had allowed him to act accordingly. Shuehu only made one move. He knew about Smiling San Sheng, so this identity is indeed useful. As for the tickets, he bought them with spirit stones. He paid 80,000 spirit stones for 2 tickets. It wasn't practical to snatch them because when he entered the Blood Dragon sect, he had sensed a powerful force lurking there. It was beyond his capabilities. There was no need to provoke such creatures. Smiling San Sheng was arrogant, but he wasn't a fool. In the afternoon, he sold many things, including the heaven-splitting halberd and the soul ascension spirit sword. He made 4,000 spirit stones from the sales, along with some pills and other items. He had 50,000 spirit stones in total. He had originally accumulated over 11,000 spirit stones. That was considered wealthy. Unfortunately, buying the tickets cost him 80,000 and left him with just over 30,000. He had also spent some on buying tea leaves. It further reduced his resources. But he still had about 30,000 spirit stones left. He knocked on Hong Yuye's door but found that it wasn't locked. "I'm coming in," he said as he pushed the door open and entered. At that moment, Hong Yuye was sitting by the water and gazing at the distant stars. She was lost in thought. "Did you find anything?" she asked. Jiang Hao nodded and then placed some pastries on the table. "I gained something. I got the tickets to Chaos Stone Island. We can board the ship tomorrow, and it will set sail in about 3 days. We're quite lucky, in that sense. If they missed this 3-day window, they could still get on board because the large ship would follow a certain route. As long as they knew the route, they would have a chance to board it. However, the final battle would take place in half a month. Missing it would make things much more difficult." After that, Hong Yuye asked Jiang Hao to make tea. Early the next morning, they waited for the sun to rise. Then, they left the place. On a remote island, some people gathered on the shore. Among them, a woman in a black robe stood in a corner. She was accompanied by 2 followers. "Madam, the ship is coming soon. The situation overseas has changed drastically, and we need to be very careful when going to Chaos Stone Island," said one of the female attendants. "People who are too strong won't be allowed on Chaos Stone Island. With you by my side, I won't be in any danger," said the woman in the black robe confidently. "Moreover, my cultivation realm is not what it used to be, but my talismans and formations are still strong. I can defend myself." The black hood covered a beautiful face. If Jiang Hao had been there, he would have recognized her as Mi Ling Yu. She was known for her forging skills. Her purpose in this trip was to report to Chaos Stone Island. As an undercover agent, she had to report her findings periodically unless she was trapped somewhere, like the Lawless Tower. If she didn't have the duty to report her findings, she would have gone to the Heavenly Note sect once again. She wanted to give Hai Luo a piece of her mind. The other heavenly kings were not happy with Hai Luo. He acted as he pleased and made them waste so many resources. He even made the other heavenly kings suspect that he was colluding with the heavenly note sect to deceive them. That damn Hai Luo. He deserves to live in the shadow. Whoosh. Someone was flying through the air. Mi Lingyu looked over with curiosity. She saw a scholar and a young lady in a red dress. The scholar wore white. He looked frail and was fanning himself with a white paper fan. The young lady looked calm and indifferent. She was very beautiful but lacked a powerful presence. Mi Lingyu looked at the scholar. "Do not provoke that person at any costs," said Mi Lingyu to her attendants. "Why?" The two attendants were puzzled. Mi Lingyu shook her head. She didn't know why, but her intuition told her so. This person should not be provoked. "It's getting foggy. Madam, the ship is coming. The members of the end of all things will find various excuses to target you. If it's not serious, you need to endure it. If there's a conflict, it'll cause us a lot of trouble on the way. Members of the end of all things can be quite unreasonable at times," said one of the attendants. "I know. I have traveled there many times. Those outlaws will seize any opportunity to cause trouble," said Mi Lingyu. At that moment, a large ship approached, and two attendants walked to the gate. For those boarding the ship, there is a food fee of 500, a management fee of 500, a protection fee of 500, an inquiry fee of 500, a maintenance fee of 500, a medical fee of 500, a sightseeing fee of 500, and a communication fee of 500. That'll be a total of 4,000 spirit stones. The attendants must also pay. The crowd was shocked. There were still so many extra charges. Anyone with objections can leave on their own. What about refunds? For that, you deal with whoever you bought the tickets from. It has nothing to do with us. Jiang Hao looked at the person who had spoken. He was only at the golden core realm. He smiled and revealed his white teeth. 8,000 spirit stones for two people. Did they think they could take that amount of money easily from him? If he let that happen, could he be called Smiling Sansheng? Chapter 599. Chapter 599. A beautiful, unforgettable woman. Chapter 599. A beautiful, unforgettable woman. Faced with the unreasonable fees imposed by the end of all things, many people had no choice but to pay. If they decided to leave, there was no way to get a refund for their tickets. Moreover, many of them were representing their respective territories on their way to the Chaos Stone Island for trade. They had their own goals and also had the backing of their respective factions, so paying a bit extra in spirit stones was not a big concern. It was precisely because of this that the members of the end of all things felt that they had the upper hand. Jiang Hao stood in line and observed as people ahead paid spirit stones. He didn't pay too much attention to it. Most of these people were carrying simple storage treasures. After some inspection, they were allowed to board the ship. Jiang Hao saw a figure in a black robe. He felt that the woman in the robe looked familiar. From the familiar aura, he guessed it must be Mi Lingyu. Why would someone like her go to Chaos Stone Island? Jiang Hao couldn't help but wonder. However, he didn't think too much of it. Meeting her was actually a good thing since he had a question that he wanted to ask. But it wasn't urgent at the moment. He turned his attention to the two attendants collecting money. Their auras didn't seem particularly powerful. They were only at the Golden Core Realm. In the eyes of these people, Golden Core Realm cultivators might not be considered strong, but they had the power to control everyone because they were members of the end of all things. That meant that the end of all things wasn't easy to deal with. At least, this ship proved that. This ship represented that organization's trade vessel, and it was reasonable for them to be cautious. Furthermore, most people had their own motives for going to Chaos Stone Island and didn't want any unnecessary complications. Soon, it was Jiang Hao's turn. The man in front of him seemed to be in a difficult situation. I only have 3,800 spirit stones. Can you make an exception, fellow disciple? The man asked in a low voice. Not enough spirit stones? Why are you boarding the ship then? Said the sharp-nosed attendant coldly. 200. Does being short by 200 mean you want us to let you in for free? Where do you get the nerve to ask us that? The sharp-nosed attendant said. No. I didn't mean that. If you didn't mean that, then pay the complete amount or get off the ship. I'll cover for him, Jiang Hao said suddenly. He handed over 200 spirit stones. We're in a hurry. We don't want just 200 spirit stones delaying us further. Thank you very much, fellow disciple, the middle-aged man said in gratitude. With the issue resolved, the man boarded the ship, and it was Jiang Hao's turn to come forward. The two attendants collecting the fees didn't see any problem. They instinctively reached out their hands to collect the spirit stones. However, instead of handing over the spirit stones, Jiang Hao snatched 2 bags of spirit stones from their hands. He kept one bag for himself and handed the other to Hong Yuye. Then, he walked inside with his group. The two attendants were astonished and quickly confronted Jiang Hao. Stop. What are you doing? The sharp-nosed attendant asked angrily. Accepting your fees. I know that you two are going to suffer a bloody disaster. I'm accepting 8,000 spirit stones in exchange for saving your lives, said Jiang Hao calmly. Hong Yuye counted the spirit stones in her hand. Are you playing a joke on us? The sharp-nosed attendant asked in a low voice. Others looked over and found that someone was asking for money in return from these attendants. Even if they did give the money, they would still have to disembark. It wasn't worth it. Do you think I took your spirit stones for nothing? Jiang Hao smiled. Don't worry. It's a fair exchange. I took the spirit stones, and I will naturally do my part. This ship is ours. Here, we are the ones collecting money. Who gave you the authority to collect money from us? Who even are you? The sharp-nosed attendant asked. Return the spirit stones, or you'll have to kneel and apologize. Otherwise, we won't let this slide, he said threateningly. Jiang Hao returned the spirit stones. Just as the attendant took the pouches back, a blade flashed and struck the attendant. This startled everyone, except Jiang Hao, who just shrugged. I told you I was protecting you from a disaster. The crowd was speechless. Suddenly, Jiang Hao turned to the other attendant. Would you also like my protection? The attendant was dumbfounded. He knew these people were not weak, but no one dared to act so brazenly here. Didn't he want to go to Chaos Stone Island? The incident quickly caught the attention of the ones inside the ship, and an elderly man appeared before Jiang Hao. Sir, you're quite bold, the elderly man said. Not as bold as you, Jiang Hao said. I wonder which faction you belong to, the old man asked. Jiang Hao opened his fan and revealed the words there, Smiling San Sheng. Smiling San Sheng? The old man was surprised, but his face darkened. If I'm not mistaken, you're acting recklessly even as a member of the End of All Things. What? Jiang Hao was puzzled. Since when did the End of All Things unite? We only share a common goal. We don't have to chummy up with each other. Even so, you killed someone under our jurisdiction. Don't you think you need to explain? The old man said coldly. Do I need to? Jiang Hao retorted with a smile. The old man frowned. He was considering whether to take action. Eventually, he chose not to. I can overlook it because you are a member of the End of All Things. However, this woman must pay the required amount of spirit stones. I hope you won't make things difficult. Jiang Hao stood there and looked like he was deep in thought. It's not impossible, but I've recently suffered an illness. What does your illness have to do with me? The old man asked. My illness is related to this woman. After I saw her once, I was unable to forget her. If I don't see her even for a day, I go mad, Jiang Hao said and smiled at the old man. If my sickness surfaces, how many spirit stones would you offer in compensation? The old man met his gaze. Jiang Hao smiled as though he was highly amused. The surrounding crowd was wary. They felt that these two people might end up fighting. In the end, the old man gave in. He snorted and turned away. Arrange accommodation for them. I hope you won't cause any trouble during this period. Otherwise, even if you're capable, you'll end up dead by my hands. Jiang Hao smiled. However, he quickly noticed the sidelong glances of others. For a moment, his heart sank. He had lost himself a bit in the previous encounter. Now that they had successfully boarded the ship, all that was left was to wait quietly for the journey to Chaos Stone Island. He wondered if they would encounter trouble along the way. After all, there were many strong individuals here, and even with his current abilities, he couldn't handle them all. Fortunately, Hong Yuye was with him. In case of a major mishap, she would also take action. He needed to talk with Mi Lingyu. He wanted to ask about something Xing had told him before. By doing so, he might exchange the information he might get from her with Kai Tian's whereabouts from Liu. If he had some time to himself later, he would pay her a visit. Chapter 600. Chapter 600. Just a performance to reach his goal. Chapter 600. Just a performance to reach his goal. Inside the room, Jiang Hao bowed apologetically in front of Hong Yuye. I had no intention of deliberately offending you, senior. Hong Yuye sat on the chair and chuckled, but she didn't say anything. Jiang Hao dared not say much. He broke into a cold sweat. However, there was still no response. Senior. There was still no reply. He looked up to see that Hong Yuye had fallen asleep with a hand propping up her face. Jiang Hao glanced at the large bed beside him. She didn't understand why she didn't just use the bed. But he didn't dare to disturb her and could only sit quietly. He waited for her to wake up. Jiang Hao thought about the incident from before. There were more formidable individuals on this ship than he had anticipated, and the reputation of Smiling Sansheng was more apparent among the end of all things. At least that old man didn't dare to act recklessly. No matter how extravagant it gets, I can't stop this ship from heading to Chaotic Stone Island. Otherwise, I'll become an enemy of everyone, and the formidable individuals of the end of all things will come after me. My own goals will be affected. Jiang Hao understood that even if Smiling Sansheng was arrogant, he shouldn't be reckless just for the sake of it. It was all a performance. Everything was just a performance to reach his goal. In the future, he would strengthen Smiling Sansheng's identity to make everyone fear him. That way, he would be able to extract information from everyone. He would then find the main target. Apart from these, he also needed to pay attention to the other people on the ship. They were not only capable but also had influential forces backing them. If he used them well, he might gain something. Unfortunately, he was not familiar with them. Currently, the only person he knew on this ship was Mi Lingyu. However, he didn't know why she was going to Chaos Stone Island. As the wife of one of the 12 heavenly kings, she held a high position overseas. So, why would she risk her life and head to somewhere as dangerous as Chaos Stone Island? After waiting for 3 days in Hong Yuye's room, the ship began to sail. She still wasn't awake. Jiang Hao left slowly. He wanted to check the situation outside. At first, he walked away softly so that she wouldn't be disturbed. After making sure she was fine, he then walked at a normal pace and left the corridor. The ship was massive and extremely fast. The sea was a beautiful azure blue. It was peaceful. "Friend," said a voice. It was a middle-aged man. Jiang Hao looked at him with some surprise. He didn't know this person. "I am Liao Shan. Thank you for sparing the 200 spirit stones. I came to pay you back. Here are 2,000 spirit stones for you." Jiang Hao was surprised. He had earned 2,000 so easily. He accepted the spirit stones and smiled. Liao Shan subconsciously felt a tightness in his chest. He hastily took his leave. Jiang Hao didn't mind that. He walked to the deck while holding his fan. There were quite a few people on the top, and most of them didn't know who he was. No one had been on the deck during the earlier altercation. Soon, he saw a person in a familiar black robe. It was Mi Lingyu. Jiang Hao appraised her. He wanted to see what she was up to before interacting with her. It seems that Mi Lingyu has been suspected for a long time. Now she is eager to break free from the Great Thousand God sect. The question is, how? In Jiang Hao's opinion, it wasn't that difficult. Mu Longyu would protect her. If they ignored the Great Thousand God sect and went their own way, they would be fine. Why make it so complicated? Moreover, Who could help her break free from the Great Thousand God sect entirely? Jiang Hao couldn't understand and didn't think much about it. He approached her. "Madam, may I ask you a question?" His sudden voice surprised Mi Lingyu and the others. Her two maids stood ready, and Mi Lingyu felt puzzled. Why would this person suddenly start a conversation with her? Smiling San Sheng. The name was unfamiliar to them, but the person's behavior from the past few days made them realize that this man was not easy to deal with. Moreover, Mi Lingyu was wary. She knew that she shouldn't offend this person no matter what. She had intended to avoid him, but unexpectedly, he approached her to start a conversation. "Friend, what do you want to ask?" Mi Lingyu asked. In theory, this person's strength was not enough to threaten her. But she felt that this was out of her control. No one knew what this person might do. "It's about a formation. I'd like to ask for your opinion. As for compensation, I can help you in the future if you need me." Jiang Hao smiled. Right now, he didn't have anything that could help her. If she didn't need it, there was nothing he could do. Formation? Mi Lingyu realized that he already knew her identity. After hesitating for a moment, she said, "What kind of formation is it?" Jiang Hao didn't hide anything and spoke about the formation that Xing had mentioned. "How about it?" "Huh." Mi Lingyu was puzzled. "Is that it?" Jiang Hao nodded. "It's the yin-yang formation," said Mi Lingyu. "This is clearly a yin-yang formation." The part of the formation he saw was a yang formation, while the invisible part was a yin formation. The most ingenious aspect of this formation is making it impossible for people to locate the yin formation. In fact, it's not that difficult. Usually, if you interfere with the same formation within the main 4 areas of the formation, you can find some traces. Just like that. Jiang Hao felt incredulous. If that doesn't work, you'll have to destroy the surrounding buildings, go underground, or climb a high mountain. If that's still not effective, you may have to attempt to distort the space. Some might be hidden within the space, Mi Lingyu said. "Thank you for the information," said Jiang Hao. He still didn't understand the formation and didn't want to embarrass himself by asking further. He asked her if there was anything he could help with. Mi Lingyu shook her head and said there was nothing for now. He didn't expect this formation to be broken so quickly and easily. He wasn't sure if the information he received was true or not. He could try informing Xing about it later and see if anyone had informed him about it already. After all, Gui and Liu were not ordinary people. With a few more formation masters, they could figure it out. After waiting for 7 days, Jiang Hao noticed that there were more and more people on the ship. There were all kinds of people. He saw 2 ordinary non-cultivators. They were wrapped up tightly, and he didn't know why. At this moment, his stone tablet vibrated. There was a gathering tonight. Chapter 601. Chapter 601. I don't know. Don't look at me. Chapter 601. I don't know. Don't look at me. A gathering. It's been so long since the last one. I wonder how everyone is doing. During this time, he had done a lot, and others wouldn't have stayed idle either. They should have made gains in various places. Many things might have happened around them. On the deck, while enjoying the scenery, Jiang Hao also observed the people around him. The people here had decent strength, and some were concealing their cultivation realms. Many of them had unique auras. That meant that they had extraordinary treasures with them. However, the 2 ordinary people he had seen earlier were truly just that. They were ordinary non-cultivators. He didn't understand how these 2 managed to get on board. Could they really safely make it to land? Unfortunately, Jiang Hao didn't want to meddle. He returned to his room and waited for it to be midnight. During this time, he reviewed the last gathering and compiled useful information. This was to prepare for the upcoming gathering. In the previous gathering, the most crucial thing was the ancestral dragon's heart. I wonder where the ancestral dragon's heart is. After organizing everything, he calmed himself and waited for midnight. Hong Yuye's room was right next to his. He didn't know when she would wake up, so he made some tea and left some pastries for her. At midnight, Jiang Hao attended the gathering. It had been half a year since the last gathering, and he was looking forward to it. Soon, he arrived at his designated spot, where there were 3 other people beside him. "Greetings, Senior." After exchanging greetings, the 4 of them sat down cross-legged. It was like they were in the boundless starry sky waiting for Senior Dan Yuan to enlighten them on their doubts. "Do you have any cultivation-related questions?" Dan Yuan asked. Liu and Xing asked their questions. One was about the breakthrough after self-transfer, and the other was about the convergence of the main body and the avatar. Jiang Hao only vaguely understood what they were saying. It was too complex. After answering their questions, Senior Dan Yuan asked if any of them had more cultivation-related questions. This time, no one spoke up. Jiang Hao had never had any cultivation-related questions, and Gui seemed to have completed her advancement. So, there were no follow-up questions. "Do you have any news about the Heaven Lock technique? If you don't, there's no need to ask further. There is someone who already looked at the Heaven Lock technique," said Dan Yuan. Jiang Hao lowered his head. He knew who that was. Kendo. Fortunately, he had only looked at the theory of the Heaven Lock technique and not the real application of the technique. Perhaps knowing the concealed part was the most crucial, but he chose to give up. Once seen, it was easy to lose one's way. For some powerful people, the Heaven Lock technique was a path to endless possibilities. However, no one knew what this path would bring to oneself, or even to the cultivation world. "News of the heavenly fragrance Dao flower will still be counted," Senior Dan Yuan said. The others didn't pay much attention to this. The heavenly fragrance Dao flower was in the Heavenly Note sect, and the Heavenly Note sect was under the jurisdiction of Jing. Since Jing hadn't spoken yet, the others didn't get involved either. Moreover, Gui had been there a few times and had found nothing. Others were too far away from the Heavenly Note sect, so it was impossible for them to get involved and learn more. "I heard that the End of All Things has already found the location of the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl. If you have relevant information, you can exchange it for rewards from me. I also heard that the End of All Things has information about true dragons. If you have information regarding that, you can tell me," Senior Dan Yuan said. Jiang Hao was surprised. The Earth Extreme Silent Pearl has been found? He hadn't sensed anything recently. Could it be because he was too far away? He had to pay attention to this matter because the last time he had sensed the pearl, it was in the south. Once it erupted, the southern region would be affected. As for the news about the true dragon, there was indeed one, but he wasn't sure if it was true or false. This was a good opportunity to check it out. However, there were some things that needed to be discussed. He remained silent for a moment, then said, "The Earth Extreme Silent Pearl should be in the south." "The south?" Gui looked at Jiang Hao in disbelief. "Why is it in the south again?" The Earth Extreme Silent Pearl was in the south, and the Heavenly Fate Misfortune Pearl was also in the south. Why were there so many disasters-inducing treasures in the south? "Don't look at me. I don't know." Jiang Hao also didn't understand why. Everything was always found in the south. Perhaps during ancient times, these things happened to be gathered in one place and were sealed, and that place happened to be in the south. Many things were related to the Heavenly Note sect as well. "Do you have the time to find out more, friend Jing?" Dan Yuan asked. Jiang Hao shook his head. He really didn't have time. Otherwise, he could try to find the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl. After all, he had a fragment of the Earth Extreme Heart-Devouring Pearl. That made it easier for him to sense other things. "What about you, friend Gui?" Dan Yuan asked. "I'm still in the south. I'm checking to see if anyone from the End of All Things is getting close," Gui said. However, she was very curious about what Jing was up to. "Jing did seem pretty busy lately. How much do you all know about the ancestral dragon's heart?" Dan Yuan changed the topic. Lately, overseas cultivators have been chasing after the ancestral dragon's heart. It seems that they have all gone to the Abyssal Sea. Many people are taking along things related to the Dragon Clan, Jiang Hao said. In this gathering, they discussed various matters and shared information about recent events and their own circumstances. The gathering was a valuable opportunity to exchange information and insights. They helped each other in the cultivation path. So far, we haven't come across the ancestral dragon's heart. It might be because we aren't qualified enough to enter the abyssal sea, Liu said. I heard about it in the south too. Some people have started searching for things related to the true dragon, Gui said. I haven't heard anything related to this for now. Xing shook his head. I have some free time lately, so I can keep an eye on the progress of this matter, Liu said. Dan Yuan nodded and didn't say anything more. Afterward, they started their individual transactions. Xing was the first to speak. Do any of you have information about the formation? Jiang Hao waited for a while and noticed that none of the others spoke. It's a yin-yang formation. Yin-yang formation? Gui was surprised. I have seen that before, but the one Xing showed us didn't seem to be a yin-yang formation. It should have a mutual response and allow Xing to see its changes. With these changes, Xing would have been able to perceive. Jiang Hao was surprised. However, since he had already spoken, he could only go on. I've heard that the essence of the yin-yang formation lies in concealing the yin formation. Perhaps you can pay attention to the four main directions, the surrounding buildings, space, etc. Maybe you can find some clues, said Jiang Hao. After that, Jiang Hao didn't speak further. Mi Lingyu had only said that much to him. If she was correct, then Gui might be mistaken about the formation. In any case, he couldn't say more for now. Xing was silent for a moment. Actually, it's not impossible. Although it's different from the usual yin-yang formation, it's possible that we haven't encountered this kind of yin-yang formation before. Thank you, friend Jing. I'll keep it in mind and see if that works. If it does, I'll provide any reward that you want, said Xing. Jiang Hao nodded and then looked at Liu. I want to use the reward from Xing to exchange information about Kai Tian's location, plus the information about Tian Chen. If there's no progress on Xing's end, then I will personally pay the reward. Liu and the others were surprised. Did that mean Jing was overseas? Chapter 602. Chapter 602. This is making things difficult for me. Chapter 602. This is making things difficult for me. Jiang Hao had faith in Mi Lingyue's knowledge, so he felt that he could secure Xing's reward. Even if he couldn't secure it, he would have to offer a reward to Liu. Even if he succeeded with Xing, he would have to wait till another gathering to get Kai Tian's location. That would be too late. The information about Tian Chen was just an additional task. Otherwise, just asking for Kai Tian's location would be too simple. Of course, he wouldn't let Liu ask for a reward upfront later on. It was somewhat dangerous for him. Before they brought it up, he would give the information about the true dragon to them. This way, he could obtain the information and get a corresponding reward from Dan Yuan. Are you certain, friend Jing? Liu asked. If it's only these things, I can give the information to you now. Jiang Hao nodded and remained silent. Soon, he received a message on the slate regarding Kai Tian's location and the information about Tian Chen. It contained his recent location, a brief background, and information about the weaknesses in his technique. It mentioned his child too. However, that wasn't certain. It only provided some suggestions of the places where Tian Chen's son might be. It seems that Feng Hua understands his collaborators better than others. It also showed that Liu was not simple at all. Without any prior preparation, he knew so much. Ordinary individuals wouldn't have such capabilities. As for Kai Tian's location, it seemed to be on a large island. However, the information provided by Liu had a point worth noting. It was labeled 7-Day Village, and the explanation given was that this village was somewhat unusual and highly regarded. But there wasn't anything more than that. Coincidentally, that's my destination. Jiang Hao didn't say much and watched to see if they had any other tasks. I've been looking for a person named Yin Zichen lately. If you have any information, please inform me. He should be from the Heavenly Spirit Tribe, Gui said. Yin Zichen from the Heavenly Spirit Tribe? I think I heard about him many years ago. It's said that he killed quite a few members of the tribe and was eventually exiled. He hasn't been active overseas in these years, Liu said. Jiang Hao thought for a moment and confirmed that he hadn't heard this name before. He had heard of Yin Wei, though. He was probably after him, so Jiang Hao needed to be cautious. I have a problem with another formation too, said Xing. The formation is called Burning Immortal. When you enter the formation, you will be considered as one of the immortals at the center of the formation. The formation is hard to understand and even harder to break. So, any related information about the formation and ways to break it would be appreciated. Jiang Hao lowered his head. From the name alone, he could guess that this formation was extraordinary. However, it wasn't practical to ask Mi Lingyu since she wasn't coming out onto the deck anymore. He could ask Hong Yuye, but he didn't know if she would be interested. After that, there were no more transactions. Gui and the others began discussing recent events around them. I have a feeling that a powerful figure has appeared in the south. People kept mentioning a person with an extraordinarily calm aura, whom they hadn't seen the true appearance of. I wonder who it is, Gui said and looked at Jiang Hao. Don't look at me. It's not me. If his guess was correct, it should be Shong'an. Has the Grand Earth Sovereign appeared? Asked Xing. Gui thought for a moment. It's hard to say. It seems like they have, but the details aren't clear. It's probably just a matter of time. It is said that at the final moment, a strong figure suddenly appeared and assisted the Shenyuan clan with the momentum of the Mountain and Sea Sword Force. Based on that, I guess it's a senior from the Mountain Sea Sword sect. The details of the situation are unclear. Jiang Hao initially wanted to tell them but restrained himself. After all, Kendo might not be his real name. If he said something without basis, it might affect his impression in this gathering. He did know that Kendo had viewed the Heaven Lock technique, but it wasn't appropriate to tell them directly. So, he chose to remain silent. The secret location of the Bright Moon sect seems to involve the Human Emperor and the fallen Immortal clan. Many people have found things related to the Human Emperor. They speculate that there might be the Human Emperor's sword there, said Xing. The Human Emperor's sword? Jiang Hao thought of the Shenyuan sword. If it was true, then the Bright Moon sect was indeed remarkable. First, there was the Heavenly Tao Foundation establishment, and then there was the Grand Earth Sovereign. Recently, the Clear Sky School has been taking some actions. It seems that many people want to know about Shong'an, who possesses a sage's heart. They have formed groups to start looking for him, said Xing. Jiang Hao found it strange. Those people truly had no jobs of their own. He thought of Liu Xingchen, who was always busy with something. Xing and Gui had something to say, but Liu didn't say anything more. Jiang Hao felt a bit regretful. He was overseas now, and if there were observations or information, it would be beneficial for him. Now, he could only listen and observe as much as possible on his own. After a while, the gathering ended with a reminder from Senior Dan Yuan. As he left the gathering, Jiang Hao took out a book and wrote down the information he had gained on Kai Tian and Tian Chen. Kai Tian wasn't on the ship's usual route. He could only wait and find out more about him. Then, he began to jot down other things from the gathering. Senior Dan Yuan started paying attention to the Earth Extreme Silent Pearl and also showed interest in the news of the True Dragon. There has been no progress regarding the Ancestral Dragon's heart. It seems that entering the Abyssal Sea is necessary to find the Ancestral Dragon's heart. Completed Xing's task and exchanged it for Kai Tian's location and information about Tian Chen. Xing mentioned a new formation named Burning Immortal, while Gui was searching for Yin Zichen. There might be a connection between the secret location of the Bright Moon sect and the Human Emperor. The Shenyuan sword might be located there. Jiang Hao didn't record anything else and didn't pay much attention to other news. After completing, Jiang Hao began to review the information about Tian Chen. The data showed that he frequently went to Chaos Stone Island and had collaborations with the Great Thousand God sect. His strength should be in the early to late stage of the return to Void Realm. There might be an Immortal Ascension platform expert on Chaos Stone Island. Jiang Hao couldn't help but sigh. If he were an Immortal Ascension platform expert, he would be much more relaxed. In places with fewer people, the return to Void Realm was undoubtedly powerful. However, In places where sects gathered, the Immortal Ascension platform was where true strength lay. Even in a top-tier sect, there were probably only a dozen or so experts in that realm. Reaching the Immortal Ascension platform was a feat only a few achieved. After closing the book, Jiang Hao began to meditate and rest. Early the next morning, he knocked on Hong Yue's door, but there was no response. When he entered the room, he saw that she was still asleep. Her cheek rested on her hand, just like when she had first fallen asleep. She hadn't woken up in so many days. Jiang Hao felt helpless. He left her room. He walked to the deck, where some people without cabins had to huddle in a corner and wait to reach their destination. Normally, Jiang Hao wouldn't pay attention to these people, but now, with two seemingly ordinary non-cultivators, his attention was drawn to them. It was the same for the others. Jiang Hao found the two people and observed them without saying anything. He wanted to try and make sense of the situation. One was a man, and the other was a woman. They looked to be in their 20s. Jiang Hao had observed them for a week, but he still hadn't seen the woman clearly. It seemed that she was very concerned about being seen. As for the man, he was only passable in terms of looks. By this time, the ship had already received all the passengers and began sailing on its official route to Chaos Stone Island. It would pass by 2 more islands where passengers would disembark for half a day. The whole journey would take 7 days. Isn't it really strange to have 2 ordinary people? What kind of ordinary people can board this ship? Suddenly, a young man walked over to them. Jiang Hao frowned. Was he trying to be a hurdle in his observation? Chapter 603. Chapter 603. Why did you use your face to hit my hand? Chapter 603. Why did you use your face to hit my hand? Ran Hui was a regular schoolteacher from a common town. Ever since he had married, there had been strange occurrences in his home. The neighbors claimed that his wife was a demon in disguise, and misfortune was bound to follow. Ran Hui didn't believe them. However, no matter how many times they moved, the troubles continued. Once, they had almost died. It was during that perilous time that they met a woman. She gave them a token and 2 tickets. Then, they boarded a ship. The woman had told them that they might find a place to stay on the other end of the journey. But the woman also warned them that the journey would be extremely challenging, and the token wouldn't protect them for long. In the end, they chose to board the ship and relied on the token. They didn't have to pay the extra fees. But they had no cabin assigned to them, so they had to huddle in a corner on the deck and eat dry rations. Everyone on this ship exuded an extraordinary aura, and some even possessed formidable magical abilities. Many observed them, and discussions had started on how to test this couple. Ran Hui and his wife were extremely frightened until one day, a scholar stood beside them. They thought that the scholar would cause trouble for them, but he never made a move and didn't speak to them. The people around them seemed afraid of this scholar. So, the scholar just watched over them from that day on, and no one dared to approach them. In this way, they lived for several days in safety. But one day, someone approached them. They wanted to see what these 2 ordinary people were up to. In an instant, Ran Hui felt as if they were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. The couple held hands tightly. They were ready to face whatever was coming. Jiang Hao stood nearby and watched the trembling woman lean against the man. They seemed to have made a decision. Whoosh! The scholar opened his fan, and the 4 words smiling San Sheng flashed noticeably. This is quite troublesome. His voice was deep. His pearly white teeth became visible once again. 2 ordinary people trying to hide. What are you hiding from? Asked the young man. Several others accompanied him. They were all curious about these 2 non-cultivators. Esteemed immortal, we have not offended you in any way. Please spare us, said Ran Hui pleadingly. He knelt on the floor. It's all right. We're just here to take a look. We won't harm you. Take off your robe and let me see, the young man said. At that point, several people gathered around. They were also curious about these 2 ordinary people huddled in the corner. The man reluctantly took off his black robe. He looked like a scholar. What about the other one? Hu Zheng asked. My wife was born ugly, And I dare not offend distinguished immortals with her appearance, Ran Hui said meekly. Ugly? Hu Zheng burst into laughter. I've seen all kinds of ugly women. Come now, reveal her, so I can take a look. Ran Hui didn't agree. He simply knelt on the ground and said her appearance might frighten others. At that moment, Hu Zheng's people came forward while trying to push Jiang Hao out of the way. He didn't budge. It seemed like everything was happening too fast. Nobody knew how to react. Hu Zheng said, "Fellow disciple, step aside and let me see what secrets these two ordinary people are hiding." The others who had tried to push Jiang Hao away didn't dare to make a move. Just as the opponent thought he had control over the situation, there was a sudden scream. One of Hu Zheng's men was flung in the air. He disappeared into the sea. He had been thrown off the ship. "Who are you?" "Me." Jiang Hao was standing on the edge of the ship. He smiled at them. "Why did you suddenly attack my man?" Hu Zheng asked. "Well, what are you going to do about it?" Jiang Hao said. "Fellow disciple, don't you think you should explain yourself?" "We're all," smack. Hu Zheng was slapped squarely on the face. The crisp sound reverberated throughout the deck. Jiang Hao had appeared beside Ran Hui. He smiled amiably. "Fellow disciple, you're really unreasonable. You used your face to hit my hand." Hu Zheng's nostrils flared up in anger. But he didn't lose his composure. "Fellow disciple, why are you going against us? Is it because you want to offend our heavenly king?" "Heavenly king?" Jiang Hao felt he should be wary of them, but he was smiling San Sheng right now. If he feared this young man, how could he claim to be the bold smiling San Sheng? He then smiled. "Fellow disciple, you're quite naive. Who says you have to provoke me to make me retaliate? Sometimes, it can be I who provokes you for a fight. You're not afraid to confront us." Hu Zheng didn't even finish his words when he was slapped in the face again. Smack. Hu Zheng felt his dignity was shattered, and his anger could have set the whole ship on fire. He had only intended to find out who these two suspicious individuals were, especially the woman. If she was indeed a stunning beauty fleeing the place, he could capture her and present her to the heavenly king. He could have earned significant rewards. If she turned out to be truly ugly, he would have killed them both here. However, to his surprise, every time he tried to approach them, this person intervened and humiliated him. "You must have a reason for picking a fight with us, right?" Hu Zheng gnashed his teeth. "Well, there's nothing special about it. I just want to talk with this scholar," said Jiang Hao. "In that case, feel free to speak," Hu Zheng said in a low voice. Jiang Hao paid little attention to him and turned to the scholar. "Lift your head and look at me." The person looked at him in panic and helplessness. Jiang Hao smiled. "Judging by your appearance, you seem like a scholar. Now, when you see me, what comes to your mind?" There seemed to be a glint in the person's eyes. It was as though he was rapidly trying to process all the knowledge he had. "Like a jade. Incomparable." Jiang Hao opened his fan to reveal the 4 words on the back of it, "Unrivaled in the world." He laughed heartily. Jiang Hao then squatted down and glanced at the woman, who was hiding her face with the black hood of her robe. Her skin was dark. She looked terrified. Jiang Hao understood why she didn't want to show her face. She had the gift of charm. Jiang Hao stood up. It was no wonder she wanted to escape. A charm physique was hard to ignore for both ordinary people and cultivators. Even if she didn't have any special talents, she would still attract trouble. It was quite remarkable that she had survived until now. But why come here? She was like a sheep entering a tiger's den. Smiling San Sheng, "Don't you already have your lady by your side? Why are you eyeing other people's partners?" said the middle-aged man teasingly. "Is your lady not attractive enough for you?" Chapter 604, Demoness, if you didn't forget, answer me. Chapter 604, Demoness, if you didn't forget, answer me. Inside the room, Hong Yuye sat on the chair. Her eyes trembled slightly as she awoke from her sleep. She slowly opened her eyes. She sensed an invisible aura dispersing around her. Her gaze paused on the teapot and pastries on the table. She touched them gently and found that the tea inside was still a little warm. Hong Yuye slowly stood up. Creak. The door opened automatically. Her steps were light, yet they resounded through the empty corridor. Occasionally, people would appear, but they seemed unable to perceive her presence. A short while later, the commotion outside caught her attention. She saw smiling San Sheng standing in front of two people in black robes. He looked wild, fearless, and ready for a challenge. Hong Yuye approached him quietly. She was observing everything that was happening. She wanted to confirm if he was really wearing the identity of another person or if this was how he always wanted to be. "Yeah," said someone in the crowd. "How good is your lady?" The voice was elusive, as if they didn't want to be recognized. "How is she, you ask?" said Jiang Hao from the center of the crowd. "Yes. How would you describe the unforgettable and haunting lady you came here with?" asked another person. Hong Yuye looked toward the center. At this moment, Jiang Hao was fanning himself and seemed unaffected by anything around him. "In the southern region, she is a peerless beauty, who is incomparable to anybody else," he said slowly. "The entire southern region? How can you be sure she's the only one like that in the entire southern region?" someone asked. "You say that because you haven't seen her smile," Jiang Hao said calmly. "What about her smile?" Hu Zheng asked. Hong Yuye looked at Jiang Hao in the crowd. She stood still and showed no emotion. No one knew what she was thinking. Jiang Hao stood in the midst of the crowd. He met everyone's gaze. He looked wild and free. A bit arrogant with madness in his eyes. "If that is true, why did you target this woman, then? Is she the only one who could compare to your lady? Have you become infatuated with this woman, or do you get infatuated with every woman you see? Are there other beauties in the other three regions apart from the southern one?" Hu Zheng asked. This time, he was fully prepared. He was determined not to get slapped again. However, the moment he finished speaking, he felt a chill behind him. A blade pierced through his body and broke through his defenses. It shattered his magical treasure. The power of this blade was strange. "Do it," he roared. In an instant, Jiang Hao sensed a powerful force that was at the peak of Soul Ascension Realm. It was at the brink of entering the Return to Void Realm. These people had decent strength. Jiang Hao's lips curled into a smile. He used the reappearance of the hidden spirit. He swung his blade and used the third form of the heavenly blade, Meteor. A burst of light flashed like a myriad of stars. A powerful force erupted and forced the people around to retreat. Then, the intense light landed in front of Hu Zheng and the others. There was a white figure in the white light. The fan unfolded and revealed 4 words, unrivaled in the world. With a wave of the fan, Hu Zheng and his group were sent flying into the deep sea. This person was so ruthless. People were frightened. It seemed this man wasn't even afraid of offending the Heavenly King. Jiang Hao turned and looked at Hu Zheng and the others. His brow twitched. He hadn't intended to throw them into the sea. After all, he hadn't taken their storage treasures yet. Someone was secretly making a move. Someone was trying to eliminate this group of people by using him. Jiang Hao did not see anyone. It seemed they had left. He continued to stand in the corner and observe the 2 ordinary people. No one knew why he wanted to keep an eye on them, but no one dared cause trouble because they were frightened. Ran Hui felt grateful, but he dared not say anything. He could only huddle with his wife in place. Jiang Hao lowered his head. He was puzzled. These 2 people seemed to be really in love. It was unbelievable. He had only come across 2 people with charming physiques till now. One was senior sister Yun Ruo, and her appearance needed no explanation. The other was the charm goddess. But the woman in front of him was like a breath of fresh air. In the evening, he walked to Hong Yuye's room and found her drinking tea and eating pastries. "Senior, you're awake." Hong Yuye put down the teacup and turned to look at him. She smiled. "She is a peerless beauty, who is incomparable to anybody else." Jiang Hao was surprised. He then felt embarrassed. He then lowered his head. "Senior, you know that poem too? I'm impressed." Hong Yuye just smiled. "Is this also something you learned from your father?" I learned it from hearsay, Jiang Hao said. Hong Yuye didn't say anything. She drank her tea. After a moment of silence, Jiang Hao asked something that had been in his mind all this time. Senior, can someone with a charm physique live a normal life like an ordinary person? What do you think? Is it good or bad to be born with such a physique? Hong Yuye asked instead. Physique itself isn't inherently good or bad. It depends on the person, Jiang Hao said. Hong Yuye was surprised. Then, why are you asking such a question? I just had this thought. I'm not sure if anyone can do it, Jiang Hao said truthfully. He knew that something that existed in nature wasn't inherently good or bad. It depended on the person and how they chose to use the particular gift. However, knowing this didn't change the fact that he didn't even know of one person who had defied convention. No. Hong Yuye shook her head. At least among those who have inherent charm physiques I know, none of them led an ordinary life. They're either forced to change, or they willingly put themselves through it. None. Jiang Hao wasn't surprised. The two ordinary people were the same. They wanted peace, but the world wouldn't give them that. Unless they secluded themselves in a place with just the two of them, it was impossible to live a peaceful life. The curse of having a charm physique was temptation. It tempted everyone around and made life difficult for those who had this gift. For a day or two, it might be fine, but over time, others became obsessed with people like that. Upon careful consideration, Jiang Hao felt that the master of the Heavenly Joy Pavilion was not very lucky. If this person was someone evil, Jiang Hao would have taken her to the sect and offered her to the pavilion master, but she was only an innocent ordinary person. Whether he was Jiang Hao or Smiling San Sheng, he had his morals. Do you remember what you'll face if you offend me? Hong Yuye suddenly asked. Jiang Hao was stunned. He wondered if she had mentioned it before. Have you forgotten? No, senior. Your every word and action is etched in my heart, Jiang Hao said. I will never forget. All right then. Answer me. Jiang Hao was speechless. Chapter 605, Chapter 605, The Demoness teases him. Chapter 605, The Demoness teases him. Jiang Hao thought for a moment but could not come up with an answer. Hong Yuye hadn't mentioned any punishment before. Most frequently mentioned was taking something from him, but it seemed not to be this kind of punishment after the offense. Speak. Didn't you say my every word is etched in your heart? Asked Hong Yuye with a smile. Jiang Hao bowed his head in silence. He didn't know how to answer and could only respond with silence. At that moment, Hong Yuye suddenly said, Come here. Jiang Hao reluctantly stepped forward. His back was already soaked with cold sweat. He wasn't very afraid of the punishment itself. What he feared was the unknown. He was unable to predict what Hong Yuye would do. That's what made it terrifying. When he walked in front of Hong Yuye, Jiang Hao saw her raise her index finger. It pointed directly at his forehead. At that moment, he felt as though he already knew his fate. He mentally prepared himself. This was better than him having to lie. A cool sensation appeared on his forehead. Jiang Hao even prepared himself to be sent flying backward. He clenched his teeth and tightened his lower back. His cultivation realm had no effect here under Hong Yuye, so he didn't need to activate his cultivation realm. At that moment, his body tilted backward. What are you doing? Hong Yuye asked. Her finger had already retracted. Jiang Hao looked forward and saw the woman in front of him. She looked amused as if she was watching some sort of joke. Jiang Hao was speechless. He hadn't been flung backward yet. Is the gathering over? Hong Yuye retracted her hand. Yes. It's already over. Jiang Hao nodded. Tell me what happened, Hong Yuye said. Jiang Hao began from the very beginning. Hong Yuye wasn't interested in Senior Dan Yuan's mission at all. It was the later part about burning immortal that caught her attention. Do you know about burning immortal, Senior? Jiang Hao asked. Do you want him dead? Hong Yuye asked back. Xing is quite helpful for us, Jiang Hao said. He was a member of the Bright Moon sect, and most of the information from the eastern region came from him. Without him, The information of the Clear Sky School and the Bright Moon sect would be completely cut off. Naturally, he couldn't be allowed to die. Then, make sure he doesn't get too close to Burning Immortal. It is important to make sure Burning Immortal formation doesn't accumulate too much power, said Hong Yuye and paused. If he tries many times, it might be too late. Jiang Hao was surprised. Too late. Hong Yuye didn't say anything further. It seemed that the more he came into contact with the Burning Immortal formation, the more power would be injected into the formation. Over time, it could be activated. By then, it would be irreversible. Jiang Hao could only hope that Xing wasn't a reckless person. Hong Yuye wasn't interested in what happened afterward. However, she did ask about the human emperor. The Shenyuan sword, Hong Yuye said calmly. But the Shenyuan sword is not in the eastern region. Then, where is it? Jiang Hao asked. Do you want it? She asked instead. I don't. Jiang Hao shook his head. Such a sword naturally has its owner. I don't need it and can't afford to wield it. Why not? You're young. You're at the early stage of Golden Core Realm at the age of 33. You're already quite remarkable, Hong Yuye said. Jiang Hao lowered his head and thought for a moment. If you wish to wear the crown, you must bear its weight. I'm not aiming for that. If you wish to wear the crown, you must bear its weight. Hong Yuye said. After that, she didn't say much. According to a legend, the southern part is the homeland of the human emperor. He fell in his homeland, and the sword he carried with him fell into oblivion along with him. The southern part? For a moment, Jiang Hao understood the helplessness of Gui. Why did it always have to be the southern region? Was it really a land of talented individuals, or a land of trials and tribulations? After he finished telling her the matters of the gathering, Jiang Hao began to discuss the issue of the ship. I've noticed that many people have similar objectives, and conflicts will be there whether they are apparent or hidden. Someone is using me and intends to use me to kill. There will likely be more trouble later. If it disturbs your peace, Senior, I hope you can understand. I might use the character of Smiling Sansheng and might end up saying things that might offend you. However, this identity is very beneficial for us. I can use it to learn more information. Smiling Sansheng? Hong Yuye looked at Jiang Hao. Jiang Hao nodded. He would not provoke any of these people if it were up to him. He would quietly wait to land at Chaos Stone Island. On the other side of the ship, 7 or 8 people sat at a table, with a middle-aged man as their leader. He looked middle-aged but had white hair. I have already driven Heavenly King Kui's people out of the ship. This time, Smiling Sansheng has helped us a lot. Otherwise, I wouldn't know what to do. Bai Ying smiled. He was looking for an opportunity to deal with Hu Zheng and the others. On the deck, he deliberately asked about Smiling Sansheng's female companion and incited Hu Zheng to ask further. Then, he started a conflict, and Smiling Sansheng took action. He had expelled Hu Zheng and the others from the ship entirely. We still need to dock twice more, and they may board the ship again, said a woman. No problem. It's not easy for them to board from the back. Besides, with Smiling Sansheng here, we can use the same trick again, said Bai Ying. That person is reckless. It just so happens that he's useful for us. While he's avenging himself, he clears obstacles for us. It's like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. He probably knows he should thank us. Otherwise, with his cultivation, it's impossible for him to sweep everyone on this ship. What if he finds out? Someone suddenly asked. Find out? Bai Ying shook his head. With his strength, he probably won't. Even if he does, there is no problem. Would he want to be our enemy? In the early stage of the return to Void Realm, he's not a threat to us. By then, he can only take a loss and continue to be our tool. Why bother fighting us to the death? Then what about the person behind this ship? The woman asked. What does it have to do with us? Bai Ying narrowed his eyes. The one who acted was Smiling Sansheng of the End of All Things. What does it have to do with our great 1000 God sect? Everyone nodded. In this way, Smiling Sansheng was indeed a lucky star for them. There's a problem. How do we provoke a conflict between Smiling San Sheng and the others? A young man asked. Smiling San Sheng seems to be interested in those two ordinary people. Perhaps we can use that to provoke him, said the woman. That might work, but not for long. The key is his partner. That woman seems important to him. The effect of ordinary people is limited. The key lies in his female companion. This woman seems exceptionally important to him. Just spread some rumors saying that she is carrying a valuable treasure or that she herself is an extraordinary cultivation vessel. That will tempt people to investigate, said Bai Ying. He smiled as if everything was within his control. Others agreed as well. This way, there would be fewer people competing with them. Their mission could be accomplished more smoothly in this way. Chapter 606. Chapter 606. Take a deep breath, it'll be over in an instant. Chapter 606. Take a deep breath, it'll be over in an instant. In the eastern region, there was a realm where stars flowed in reverse. Beneath the dazzling sky of the starry river drifted a vast continent. At the top of the continent, a figure sat cross-legged and resonated with the stars. And below the figure was a vast continent with a barrier in the middle separating them. The people below could only look up at the figure in the sky. The land was filled with countless mountains, rivers, and streams. In one secluded place, a group of people had gathered. They seemed to be attempting to break through the defenses of the mountain. On the other side, in the forest, a man in white clothes looked at the stone tablet in silence. He exuded a majestic aura as vast as the mountains and rivers. At that moment, the stone tablet glowed brightly. Two large characters flashed, burning immortal. The light was about to cover the entire stone tablet. But no one knew what would happen when the light covered the entire stone tablet. At that moment, a young man arrived. Senior brother Shu Bai, it's broken. The formation is broken. It's really the yin-yang formation, he said excitedly. I've never seen a yin-yang formation like this. It's amazing. I should have learned properly from my master. I didn't even know about things like this. It's broken? Shu Bai smiled. Yes, it's broken. Now, the other seniors are exploring that place. They asked me to ask you if you want to go in, the young man said. Immediately, he arrived in front of the stone tablet. Senior brother, are you going to break the burning immortal formation? I feel like the stone tablet is lighting up. Does that mean there has been some progress? It should be. Shu Bai nodded. Shall we go in again to understand the changes? The young junior asked. Shu Bai looked at the forest and remained silent. The young junior took a step forward. He intended to try it anyway. After all, he had gone in several times before. But just as he was about to enter the formation, Shu Bai grabbed his shoulder to stop him. He smiled gently. Junior brother, you're too impulsive. Let's wait a bit. Wait. The young junior was puzzled. Wait for what? Shu Bai smiled without saying a word. In the open sea, a massive ship navigated through endless sea fog and headed toward an unknown direction. Such a thick fog. Jiang Hao couldn't help but exclaim. He realized that this fog had the ability to affect his perception. It was similar to the fog in Sea Fog Cave. Perhaps both were connected. It was mind-boggling to think about. The heavenly note was far from overseas, so how could it be connected to the depths of the sea? At that moment, someone walked past him. It seemed this person was going to make a move. It has happened many times already. Jiang Hao stood with his hands behind his back. He felt a bit helpless. A tree longs for calm, but the wind never ceases to make turbulence. It had been 3 days since the last time he made a move. In these 3 days, he didn't know what rumors had been circulating in secret, but many people glanced at him. The glances and stares intensified, especially when he came out on the deck with Hong Yuye. They looked like hungry predators who had found their prey. Unfortunately, even after waiting for a few days, the others didn't make a move. Someone will eventually lose patience, and the person secretly pushing for this won't let the situation continue like this. Jiang Hao walked to Ran Hui. Let's see if anyone would come looking for trouble. When he came over, he noticed something behind Ran Hui and his wife. There were green and white energies on it. It looked quite extraordinary. But it was sealed by a force. How did this thing end up here? Jiang Hao was lost in thought when someone roared from inside. Which thief stole my azure essence cauldron? A middle-aged man rushed out. His face turned red with anger. Jiang Hao looked at the cauldron and understood what was happening. He didn't say anything but stood quietly to watch how things would develop. My azure essence cauldron is not something that anyone can steal so easily. Who dares take it without my permission? Said the middle-aged man furiously. He was ready to strike. A spell surged, and the cauldron broke through the seal. Boom! The azure essence cauldron rushed out from behind Ran Hui. This astonished the ordinary couple huddling in the corner. They were frightened. You two ordinary people dare to steal from me, the middle-aged man roared angrily. He was ready to kill the two ordinary people. However, a voice suddenly said from the crowd, these two are just ordinary people. They clearly lack the ability to steal anything. The voice was elusive. No one could be sure who had spoken. But the middle-aged man realized that these two ordinary people indeed lacked the ability to steal from a cultivator, let alone break the seal on his treasure. Then, who stole it? At that moment, another voice from the crowd said, who has been with them all this time? Just ask them. The implication was clear to everyone. The middle-aged man turned to look at Jiang Hao standing nearby. Smiling San Sheng, why did you steal my treasure? The middle-aged man asked. Shouldn't you first ask if it was really me who stole it? Asked Jiang Hao. Did you steal it? Yes. I stole it. Why did you steal my treasure? Don't you want to ask me how I stole it? How did you steal it? I stole it easily as you were too weak to prevent it from happening, Jiang Hao said with a gentle smile. You, the middle-aged man was infuriated. How dare you insult me? He triggered the blue and white energies and began to attack. The man was only at the early stage of the return to Void Realm. Jiang Hao raised his hand slightly, and the moon-slaying slash soared out of his wrist. Boom! The two engaged in a battle. Their figures were a blur, and their powers manifested in the surroundings. However, after some time, Jiang Hao stepped back. The middle-aged man had already been thrown out of the ship and had fallen into the deep sea. He vanished without a trace. This time, Jiang Hao didn't look toward the direction of the deep sea. Instead, he turned his gaze toward the deck. He smiled. I've found you. From the very beginning, he knew that someone was orchestrating everything from the shadows and using him as a tool. How could he allow himself to be someone else's tool willingly? For smiling San Sheng, that would be a thing of great shame. Naturally, he had to find them and eradicate them. He would let their blood stain the deck. At the edge of the deck at this moment, a woman and a young man exchanged a smile. Everything went smoothly. Smiling San Sheng is truly someone impulsive without brains. Indeed. I can't believe how careful I was, and yet we managed to easily trap him and make him our tool. He is too young and self-righteous. He thinks he's fearless just because he has some strength and is completely unaware that true powerhouses are using him from the shadows, said the woman disdainfully. He's being used without knowing. He gets pleasure from acting like this and thinks he's invincible. Who's finding pleasure and thinks they're invincible? Said a gentle voice from behind the woman. A white paper fan appeared near her neck. The woman's pupils contracted in fear. The fan transformed into a dagger. It pierced through her neck. A soft laughter rang in her ears like a gentle breeze. Take a deep breath. It'll be over in an instant. Chapter 607, Chapter 607, Kneel, beg, and admit you deserve to die. Chapter 607, Kneel, beg, and admit you deserve to die. A gentle smile, a soft voice, and the warm blood blocked the young man's vision. Even though he was over 100 years old and had a remarkable cultivation realm, he was still shocked by the scene before him. Originally, he had come to discuss using such a dangerous person as a tool. They thought everything was under control. But at this very moment, smiling San Sheng appeared before them. He arrived behind the senior with lightning speed and pierced her neck. The warm blood splattered on his face, and what he saw was the smile on Smiling San Sheng's face. In contrast, his senior's face showed only disbelief and fear. This eerie scene left him terrified. Fear spreads through every corner of his body with each heartbeat. He acted immediately. He gathered all his strength, struck the person before him, and sent him flying. Then, he called for help. Jiang Hao dragged the woman's head and retreated to the center of the deck. At that moment, the people saw the deck stained with blood. In the cabin, Bai Ying laughed heartily. Handled another one. There are still some people with flaws. As long as we address them accordingly, we can use Smiling San Sheng to deal with them together. By then, he would start to notice, but it would be too late. All we can do is silently accept the losses. A woman next to him nodded. Senior, your strategic planning is admirable. Bai Ying was about to respond when he froze in place. His face changed. He received a distress message, and the woman next to him had a similar reaction. What's going on? Bai Ying was puzzled. He rushed outside. Soon, their people appeared on the deck. At that moment, Smiling San Sheng stood in the center of the deck. He was dragging a woman's head along the deck as she struggled. Bai Ying's eyes widened in anger. He erupted with immense power. He tried to suppress Smiling San Sheng. Smiling San Sheng. At that moment, several members of the Great Thousand God sect stood in midair and surrounded Jiang Hao. Jiang Hao felt a bit anxious. Bai Ying was in the middle stage of the return to Void Realm. It was beyond Jiang Hao's capabilities. If it were up to him, he would try to avoid confrontation and prepare to escape. He wouldn't put himself in such a situation at all. However, he was Smiling San Sheng at this moment. Although the middle stage of the return to Void Realm was terrifying, it was precisely this kind of situation that he needed to fight his way out and let them feel the pain. Otherwise, how could they understand that borrowing a dangerous blade came with an equally heavy price? If he retreated now, it would mean Smiling San Sheng wasn't what he used to be. Smiling San Sheng, release my junior immediately, said the middle-aged man with authority. Jiang Hao smiled slightly. He realized everyone here was stronger than him. Release her? All right. He moved his hand. There was a slash. The woman stopped struggling and went still. He released her. Smiling San Sheng, the middle-aged man couldn't contain his anger and was about to attack when an elder suddenly appeared in the air. It was the person in charge of the ship. He was the one overseeing the ship's affairs. What are you doing? The old man asked in a deep voice. You should ask Smiling San Sheng about that, Bai Ying said coldly. He massacred one of our own. Do we have to endure this silently? Does the end of all things think it's the only ruler of the seas? The old man looked at Smiling San Sheng on the deck and frowned. If it's indeed his doing, you can handle it among yourselves. Some people around were watching the scene unfold. There was no harm to them if these people fought each other. Many people were delighted to see others killing each other. At that moment, Lingyu also looked toward the deck. Smiling San Sheng seemed exceptional to her. Smiling San Sheng seems to be at the early stage of the return to Void Realm. He is surrounded by people from the Great Thousand God sect. 3 at the middle stage, 2 at the early stage, and 1 at the late stage of the return to Void Realm. There are also several Soul Ascension Realm cultivators. He can't possibly be their match, a maid said. If it's the end of all things, the Great Thousand God sect would have to hold a trial. However, the evidence is right in front of us. Unless Smiling San Sheng appeals and begs the captain for help, he will suffer the humiliation and die here. Even if he does beg, there's no hope of survival. It's better to just stand tall and face death, said another maid. Lingyu remained silent and watched quietly. She felt that her 2 maids didn't remember what she had said to them in the beginning. It was safer not to offend Smiling San Sheng. Would she feel nervous and anxious if Smiling San Sheng was only good enough to die here? Smiling San Sheng, did you kill her? The middle-aged man asked. He was Yu Wei. He was in the middle stage of the return to Void Realm and was headed to Chaos Stone Island on a mission. He had thought that with his cultivation, he could toy and use Smiling San Sheng from the shadows. This was unexpected. Why don't you ask me why I killed her? Jiang Hao looked at the person in the air. No matter the reason, you're standing here just fine, while you killed our people. Don't you see the severity of the situation? Yu Wei said in a deep voice. You tell me, did you kill my people? That's all that matters. Answer me, did you kill her? Jiang Hao smiled and nodded. I killed her. Good. Since you've admitted it, there's nothing more to say. We want to kill you, and no one else can say anything. The murderer will be killed. Since you've killed our people, you have to pay the price, Yu Wei said solemnly. Heh. Jiang Hao smiled again. What price do you want me to pay? Kneel down, beg, and admit that you deserve to die 1,000 deaths, a young man shouted angrily. Jiang Hao burst into laughter. Then, his figure disappeared from the spot. It astonished everyone. Jiang Hao was too fast. He seemed to disappear into the light. When you're young, you have lofty aspirations. He slashed. I was once the best in the world. Watching the man fall in terror, Jiang Hao finally said, Do you think this is enough to make someone like me kneel and beg? Smiling San Sheng, Yu Wei shouted and launched a full-force attack on Jiang Hao. Jiang Hao activated the reappearance of Hidden Spirit and Immortal Shield. Then, he used the first form of the Heavenly Blade, Moonslaying. Boom. The two retreated some distance, but Jiang Hao did not stop. He attacked. It seems you've truly chosen the path of no return, Yu Wei said solemnly. Jiang Hao moved forward and laughed. The road is long, but there is always a way back. Jiang Hao felt that the people around him had locked onto him. Everyone in the late and middle stage of the return to Void Realm had joined forces to attack him. It was something he had never experienced in his life before. However, he was unusually calm. He had immersed himself in the role of smiling San Sheng and felt almost excited about the fight. There was madness in his eyes. Chapter 608, Chapter 608, Stars Reversed. Chapter 608, Stars Reversed. Seeing smiling San Sheng taking action, the onlookers knew that the opponent was doomed. The maid behind Mi Lingyu sighed. Smiling San Sheng has shown quite formidable combat power, but unfortunately, such a person will not bow down and will ultimately die here. If we had enough people, we could try to save him. Once we win him over, there will be some benefits in the future, said another maid regretfully. It's not possible. If someone tries to save him, many will intervene. Smiling San Sheng is too reckless, and many people won't allow such a dangerous person to exist. It seems that smiling San Sheng will die here. It seems even the End of All Things doesn't care. The End of All Things is a strange organization. There's hardly any talk of saving each other among them. It's mostly about using their members to achieve their goals. Mi Lingyu felt they were jumping to conclusions too early. Didn't they see the excitement in smiling San Sheng's eyes? Could such a person fall so easily? She couldn't believe it. Even if he fell, he must make the other side pay some price. In the cabin, the elder of the End of All Things just looked on. Beside him appeared a middle-aged man. Elder Li, it seems smiling San Sheng is going to die. It can't be helped. He acts too recklessly, Elder Li said calmly. Smiling San Sheng's life and death had no meaning for him. Boom. In the sky, Jiang Hao pushed Yu Wei back, stood in midair, and faced everyone. Bai Ying frowned. He didn't want to kill smiling San Sheng. He was a good tool, and it would be difficult to find another one like him. Unfortunately, under such pressure, the opponent had no intention of bowing down at all. With such strength, it's no wonder he dared to be so arrogant. At that moment, Bai Ying's power erupted and suppressed smiling San Sheng. Smiling San Sheng, do you still remember that you have a lady with you? You should know that many people have their eyes on her. Whether you die or escape, you will eventually part ways. Are you willing for that to happen? The power of the late stage of the return to the Void Realm was extraordinary. The aura made Jiang Hao hesitate. But at that moment, he didn't confront it. Instead, he utilized this power and arrived in front of a cultivator at the peak of Soul Ascension Realm. He smiled at the person and immediately swung his blade. Jiang Hao stepped on the opponent's corpse and looked up at Bai Ying in the sky. With the wind at my back, the horse gallops fast. I don't believe in separation in this world. Smiling San Sheng, you brought this upon yourself, Bai Ying said. His face clouded with gloom. Yu Wei also erupted with all his strength. He intended to kill the person in front of him. Other powerful individuals nearby also made their moves. This time, they wanted to show him who was stronger. Jiang Hao looked at the people around him and raised the fan in his hand. At that moment, the fan gradually transformed into a silver-white long knife. The primordial heavenly blade appeared. Jiang Hao looked at the overwhelming and suffocating power, and a wild smile appeared on his lips. He no longer had a way back now. But he felt no despair in his heart. Instead, there was a kind of excitement. Perhaps he really had taken himself for Smiling San Sheng. Uninhibited, fearless, and ready for life and death. Today, I will wield my blade fearlessly and cut down millions of enemies. The heavenly blade emitted a brilliant light as if feeling its owner's emotions for the first time. It seemed to be joyful. He used the fourth form of heavenly blade, no regrets. Boom. Endless blade lights appeared around Jiang Hao and reversed like a waterfall and rose into the sky. The fierce and powerful intent of the blade collided in the air and covered the whole sky. Everyone felt it. Smiling San Sheng was determined to perish with everyone. Kill him. Bai Ying shouted. He mobilized his cultivation realm and tried to suppress Smiling San Sheng. However, it was too late. The blade light resembled a starry river. The dazzling blade intent stunned everyone below. This is crazy, Mi Lingyue's maids were shocked. At that moment, they looked up at the sky. They didn't know who would survive. The starry blade light came and went quickly. One after another, Yu Wei and the others appeared. Everyone thought Smiling San Sheng had lost. However, as the blade light and starry river completely dissipated, the highest point in the sky revealed the figures of Bai Ying and Smiling San Sheng. At that moment, Smiling San Sheng stood high in the sky. The knife in his hand had turned into a fan. He looked full of vitality in his white robes. The sea breeze blew, and Smiling San Sheng suddenly moved. He opened the fan and descended from the sky. The first to pass was the angry Bai Ying. Everyone felt that several figures in the sky were chasing Smiling San Sheng. Under this illusion, Smiling San Sheng looked resolute. He descended slowly. There was Yu Wei, the young woman, and others. You chase after me relentlessly, and seek a glimpse of my blade, with the dazzling blade intent like a starry river illuminating tens of millions of miles. Enough to astonish you for a lifetime. Jiang Hao never stopped. He descended slowly. But no matter how dazzling the blade is, once swung, it will eventually fall. In the future, I will strike with an even more vast blade, and you. Jiang Hao passed over everyone in the air and turned to look at Bai Ying and the others. You will be left with regrets and trapped in my blade. Jiang Hao gently drew out a blade. This slash was like a gentle breeze brushing over the face. It dispersed the scent of blood and annihilated the figures of Bai Ying and the others. The originally powerful individuals dispersed like dust. Jiang Hao landed on the deck and stood with his hands behind his back. In an instant, the entire deck fell into a stunned silence. Everyone looking at Jiang Hao felt it was unbelievable. Did Smiling San Sheng win? How could that be possible? Jiang Hao smiled and walked toward the cabin. His steps were steady, but each step left behind bloodstains. He was severely injured. Right now, even a Foundation Establishment realm cultivator could kill him. Even so, he still had to remain calm and deter everyone around him. The severity of the injuries made each step difficult for him. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from the corridor. Jiang Hao's heart sank. The footsteps meant that someone was about to attack him. He stood in place. His face remained unchanged. A moment later, a red and white figure appeared before his eyes. She moved toward him elegantly. In just a few breaths, she stood in position just one step away from him. Then, she reached out her hand. Although her bright eyes seemed calm, they carried something different. Jiang Hao placed his hand on her palm. "Thank you, senior," he said weakly. At this moment, he really couldn't move anymore. "Is this really you or smiling San Sheng?" said Hong Yuye in a voice devoid of emotion. "It's not me. How can I ever afford to be so reckless?" Jiang Hao's voice was very weak. "Is that so?" Hong Yuye didn't ask further, as if she already understood. Chapter 609. Chapter 609. The outstretched hand of the Demoness was like a light in the darkness. Chapter 609. The outstretched hand of the Demoness was like a light in the darkness. In the corridor, two figures walked hand in hand. Under the gaze of the crowd, they gradually disappeared into the distance. Many outside wanted to make a move, but in the end, they gave up. At this moment, the middle-aged man beside Elder Li said, "Smiling San Sheng is injured and already on the verge of collapse. If someone makes a move, it will be a sure kill. The woman by his side is not a threat. Yes. Smiling San Sheng is heavily injured. Anyone on the ship could kill him easily. But why is no one taking action?" Elder Li asked. "Are they afraid? Does Smiling San Sheng have someone backing him?" the middle-aged man asked. "No." Elder Li shook his head. "Behind the people present, there are various forces. Not everyone despises Smiling San Sheng. Initially, most wanted Smiling San Sheng dead, and even if someone wanted to save him, it was difficult to defuse the situation. But now, the situation has changed. The strength Smiling San Sheng displayed far exceeded expectations. If someone makes a move, it means they are sure that Smiling San Sheng has no more strength left. That's a risky bet. Others can bet that Smiling San Sheng still has strength and will stand up for him. If someone does that, then they will have to stand by it. It's all very complicated. How can it be explained in just a few words?" The middle-aged man nodded. After hesitating for a moment, he asked curiously, "Elder Li, do you think Smiling San Sheng still has strength left?" "No, but I also dare not make a move," Elder Li said calmly. The middle-aged man was surprised. "Let's go. There's no need to linger here." Elder Li turned and left. Smiling San Sheng's final strike was very powerful, but the aftermath will torment him for a long time. There are plenty of opportunities if you want to take action against him. There's no need to do it at this moment. The old man left the scene. Meanwhile, Ling Yu, who was secretly watching Elder Li, sighed. If only this person had taken action. She had just given orders for the two maids to keep a close eye. If anyone made a move, they should intervene. This way, they could establish a good relationship with Smiling San Sheng. She had been wary of him from the beginning. Collaborating with someone this powerful could reap unexpected gains. Even if Smiling San Sheng really died in the end, she would suffer no losses. As for being enemies with others, when personal interests were common, there were no enemies. "How did Smiling San Sheng win?" one of the maids asked in confusion. "Anyway, he can afford to be arrogant. The strike just now was unbelievable, but he must have suffered a tremendous backlash. It's hard to say if he can recover," said another maid. Ling Yu had also noticed it. She could see that the previous move had almost drained Smiling San Sheng of all his strength, as if everything was concentrated on that terrifying blade's intent. It would be difficult to recover, but she still felt that this person was extremely dangerous. She must not make him an enemy at any cost. At that time, there were many who expressed regret. Ran Hui had seen everything. As an ordinary person, he could understand it as well. The scholar who helped him was indeed extraordinary. When he descended to the deck, he stood with his hands behind his back. Nobody had dared to utter a word. He was truly incomparable. Such a person was admirable, but he was just a commoner and dared not ask for too much. He only wished for a peaceful life with his wife. The entire ship was silent. The silence lasted for 7 days. During this time, Smiling San Sheng did not appear again. Many people were restless. They wanted to know what was happening. Some guessed secretly that Smiling San Sheng had already secretly left, and others thought that Smiling San Sheng was heavily injured and beyond recovery. However, even if rumors were everywhere, No one dared to break open that wooden door and peek inside. They could only wander around and keep a close watch. As time passed, the ship began to dock. After stopping for a day, they set sail again. 5 days later, they would dock again, and it would be the last stop. When the ship docked, the influence of smiling San Sheng quietly dissipated. However, that didn't mean people weren't curious. Some were even planning to knock on the door and ask if he needed any help. They wanted to know what was happening. Let's try it. Now that the ship is docked, we can approach with good intentions. He won't have any reason to act against us even if he has recovered. 3 people were discussing it secretly. But what if he attacks us? A worried woman asked. We can bring a gift. If anything seems off, we can offer the gift to save ourselves. It's best to make it valuable, said another person. What if we find out he's not in a good condition? The woman asked. Don't make a move. Sell the information to others, said the other person. Okay. At that moment, a woman walked toward the room where Jiang Hao was. Since the bloodstains were quite obvious, there was no confusion about which room Jiang Hao was in. Inside the room, Jiang Hao slowly opened his eyes. Not only had he returned to his peak state, but his strength had also improved. The no-regrets technique is unexpectedly terrifying, truly beyond my expectations. He had underestimated the power of that technique. At the same time, his understanding of the backlash of the no-regrets technique was insufficient. In any case, he wouldn't choose the no-regrets technique. If it weren't for Hong Yuye, he might have been in danger. Or perhaps it was because she was there that smiling San Sheng could afford to be so reckless. He didn't know what he was thinking. At that time, he didn't have many thoughts. He was just thinking about applying what he had learned. But it had made him appear foolish. In the past, when Hong Yuye was present, he would not display his skill with the heavenly blade. Now that he had used it, it would surely be noticed by her. The revival of withered wood ability manifested automatically to heal his severe injury. However, the reason he was able to recover so quickly this time was that he had taken the sea god pill. In just 3 days, he had mostly recovered. The following steps were recuperation and absorbing the gains from this incident. The no-regrets technique made him understand more about the 7 forms of heavenly blade, and he gained better control of the strength within his body. Now, he was somewhat stronger than he was before when swinging the blade. Of course, after unleashing that technique, he was only calm because the revival of withered wood helped him. The reason he had been able to walk back to his room was only because Hong Yuye had come out to meet him. So, he sincerely thanked her. Her outstretched hand had been like a glimmer of light in the darkness. After a moment of silence, Jiang Hao looked back at the no-regrets technique once again. At that moment, blade intent appeared around him, and a glint of blade light emanated from his eyes. Suddenly, the knocking interrupted him. Who is it? He asked instinctively. The blade intent surged around him. In an instant, the person at the door seemed to feel the oppression, and their breathing halted. They regretted coming here. Chapter 610. Be more careful in your next life. Chapter 610. Be more careful in your next life. Senior, we brought you a gift, said a voice from the door. Jiang Hao frowned but still moved toward the door. As he opened the door, he saw a young woman of around 17 or 18. She was in the middle of Soul Ascension realm. In reality, she wasn't that young. She was putting up a disguise. Greetings, Senior, said the woman. She was wearing a pink gown, and her hair was tied up in a bun. Are you looking for me? Jiang Hao asked calmly. The young woman smiled. Our elders admire your fortitude, Senior. We haven't seen you for a few days, and we were concerned. I was specially assigned to bring this to you. She handed over a delicate box. Jiang Hao saw that it was a spirit herb. It could invigorate the body's lifeblood and spiritual energy. It seemed to be some kind of healing spirit herb. Thank you, fellow disciple. I accept it with gratitude. Would smiling San Sheng refuse something offered for free? Also, the ship has docked. If you want to go ashore for a stroll, it's better to do it early, Senior. We'll be setting sail in a little while, said the young woman. Jiang Hao nodded and thanked her. He then closed the door. The young woman breathed a sigh of relief. Incurable injuries? How laughable. She had felt the chilling blade's intent. If she hadn't seen him, she wouldn't have believed it. Everyone guessed wrong. The rumors were wrong. Smiling San Sheng had recovered. She didn't know when he had recovered. It seemed like he was waiting for her to come to him. If she had shown hostility, even thinking about it made her shudder. Inside the room, Jiang Hao sighed as he looked at the box. "Do you not like it?" said a sudden voice. Jiang Hao almost replied. He turned to see Hong Yuye sitting in the corner and drinking tea. He hadn't noticed her just then. "It seems you didn't notice me," Hong Yuye said with a smile and held up her teacup. Jiang Hao caught himself and said respectfully, "Senior, your cultivation is incomparably vast, and your aura blends with heaven and earth. I am just a humble junior and find it difficult to perceive your awe-inspiring presence." Hong Yuye looked at the man in front of her. Jiang Hao broke into a cold sweat. After a little while, he changed the subject. "Do you want to go ashore? I heard the ship has docked today." Hong Yuye placed the teacup on the table and stood up. "Let's go." Jiang Hao breathed a sigh of relief. In the corridor, only the two of them were walking. Their walk was so synchronized that a person looking from the side would think only one person was walking around the corridor. "There are quite a few eyes around. It seems that I've attracted some people's attention. I'm sorry to have disturbed your peace, Senior," Jiang Hao said on the way. He could sense that some people were retreating, and others were trying to observe his condition. If he hadn't recovered quickly, he would have been facing a group of enemies. It didn't matter. Smiling San Sheng was not easy to provoke. There was a commotion outside. Jiang Hao also saw the light on the deck. Voices reached his ears. Why hasn't anyone paid attention to these two ordinary people until now? Did they deliberately wait for us to come? "Let me see what ability these ordinary people have to board this ship," said a sarcastic voice. "This small-footed one, this young lady is just perfect for practice. I only need one more vessel. Elder, my wife is hideous. I dare not dirty your eyes with my wife's appearance." "Ugly? Then, it's just perfect. I haven't tried the ugly ones yet." Shouts of surprise came from the crowd. Jiang Hao glanced at Hong Yuye. He was afraid such filthy language would offend her and ruin her mood. But Hong Yuye remained indifferent. He was unsure of her thoughts. After a while, they arrived at the deck. The light shone on them. The voices suddenly fell silent. The middle-aged man, who was watching the two ordinary people, was stunned. He felt a sudden change in the atmosphere. He turned to look and saw a white-clad man behind him with a smile. He could clearly feel that the change in the surroundings had occurred because of this man. "Fellow disciple, do you also wish to try?" asked the middle-aged man. Jiang Hao looked at the man in front of him. His behavior was not surprising. He appeared to be middle-aged, with a chaotic aura all over his body. His eyes were clouded with desire. His lifeblood and spiritual energy were erratic. It showed signs of dual cultivation, but it was extremely crude. "I do not wish to try." Jiang Hao shook his head. He wasn't interested in this at all. "Then, what do you think we should do with them?" the middle-aged man asked. Although he didn't feel that this person was very powerful, the sudden change in the atmosphere on the deck indicated that he shouldn't be underestimated. "I just want to tell you that I am observing these two people. I don't like being obstructed in my observation," Jiang Hao said calmly. "I see. I apologize for disturbing you, fellow disciple," said the middle-aged man with a smile. He showed respect to this person. However, if some kind of accident happened to the two ordinary people after the person left, it wouldn't be the middle-aged man's fault. He often did things like this. Once the deed was done, there was nothing this person could do. He would just apologize and appear meek. In the end, all would be well. "Well, think nothing of it." Jiang Hao smiled. The middle-aged man secretly rejoiced. It seemed this person was still too young to understand. Just as he was about to say something else, a fan suddenly touched his forehead. He heard laughter like a gentle breeze. Just be more careful in your next life. The sword's intent emerged. The middle-aged man's pupils contracted in fear and disbelief. Before he could even think, his consciousness faded. The ruthlessness of the person was almost demonic. After the blade light dissipated, the middle-aged man turned into fragments and fell to the ground. Jiang Hao kicked the storage treasure to Ran Hui. Help me sort that out. Give it back to me when I return. After saying that, he walked toward the shore with the woman by his side. No one dared to speak throughout the whole process. No one dared to do anything more. Smiling San Sheng's ruthlessness knew no bounds. Everyone became more wary. Mi Lingyu was watching from the shadows. She had just received the news that Smiling San Sheng had recovered. She didn't expect to see him come out as soon as she arrived and kill someone on the spot. How did he recover so quickly? As a master in various aspects, she had a deep understanding of Jiang Hao's previous condition. In theory, recovery should have been very difficult for him. She was deep in thought. "Madam, should we try to make contact with him?" a maid asked her. Mi Lingyu snapped back to reality. In fact, she was thinking not only of forming a good relationship with him but also of his purpose for this trip. The person in front of her was unique, and perhaps he could help her. But things were too dangerous, and she didn't dare trust him. On the other side, a rather humble middle-aged man also watched Jiang Hao depart. He was the man from before who had been short of 200 spirit stones. Smiling San Sheng. He used a spell to send out the information that he had seen and heard in the past few days while he was docked. Chapter 611, The People Around Smiling San Sheng. Chapter 611, The People Around Smiling San Sheng. Heavenly River Island was an extremely prosperous island in the Milky Way. Sea. On the eastern side of this island stood a tall building. It was called the Heavenly Tower. Many messages from the sea could be transmitted from here. At that moment, a young man walked into the backyard. He had a restrained aura, and his cultivation realm was not apparent, but his eyes were full of vitality. After a while, he arrived in front of a room. He bowed respectfully and said, "Mr. Dao, I pay my respects." Creak. The door automatically opened. Inside the room, a middle-aged man sat cross-legged, with a rather robust physique. He didn't look like a scholar at all. "Jushin, it's been a long time." Mr. Dao's voice was deep and warm. "Mr. Dao, you've been in seclusion for quite some time, and I didn't dare to disturb you," Jushin said with a respectful bow. "Is there any news?" Mr. Dao got up and walked to the table to pour some tea. "I received information about a person from the ship, and it felt rather unusual," Jushin said. "Who is it?" Mr. Dao gestured for the person in front of him to sit down. Jushin sat down. "Smiling San Sheng." "Smiling San Sheng?" Mr. Dao paused. "When did he appear?" "Earlier this month, on the coast," Jushin said. It was now approaching the end of the month, which meant that he had been in the region for about half a month. Mr. Dao didn't seem too concerned about this but asked more about Smiling San Sheng. Jushin explained everything. At first, the informant investigated as soon as he received the information. They bought their tickets from the Blood Dragon sect, and they managed to get the tickets after some confrontation. Afterward, he appeared on the ship and acted very arrogant. Not long ago, he used a single move to kill 8 people from the Great Thousand God sect. Were also 2 others in the Soul Ascension realm. He used a sword technique that could only be described as all-encompassing. All of this is relatively normal. Except for his exceptionally powerful combat ability, nothing else is particularly outstanding. The issue is that everyone believed he was severely wounded and close to death, yet 7 days later, he has already recovered to his peak. Perhaps he had some sort of healing divine medicine? Mr. Dao asked. There is indeed such a possibility, but the informant still finds it strange. He intentionally attracted everyone's attention in the beginning as if knew he was extraordinary from the very beginning, said Jushin. What did the informant sense that was so strange? Mr. Dao asked. It seems Smiling San Sheng seems to like helping the weak, or he may feel some goodwill toward struggling people. But his personality is strange. It might be necessary to try to make contact with him. Furthermore, when getting close to him, one will have an inexplicable palpitation without any apparent reason, Jushin said. Mr. Dao lowered his head and remained silent for a while. Is Smiling San Sheng traveling alone? That is strange as well, Jushin said. The informant mentioned that Smiling San Sheng is traveling with another person, and it was specifically stated that there are two people. However, he doesn't mention the other person at all, as if he's forgotten all about them. Maybe he didn't even realize it. Mr. Dao sipped his tea in silence. What is Smiling San Sheng's purpose for this trip? He asked. I don't know. Jushin shook his head and thought for a moment. Most of the people on the ship are heading to Chaos Stone Island for the true dragon's blood. At least, the forces behind them are. Mr. Dao smiled. Where has Tian Chen been lately? He's been on a mission outside, but he should be heading to Chaos Stone Island in a few days, Jushin said. But he couldn't understand the connection between the two. Mr. Dao chuckled. Tell those who are observing not to offend Smiling San Sheng. Don't stop him no matter what he does. Something might happen on Chaos Stone Island, so let him protect himself as much as possible. Understood. Jushin didn't know what Mr. Dao meant, but he didn't ask any further questions. Is it still impossible to summon the ancestral dragon's heart? Mr. Dao asked. Someone has invoked the ancestral dragon's heart, but it still cannot be truly summoned. They're all waiting for the trade on Chaos Stone Island, Jushin said. Whether the dragon blood is genuine is still debatable, and others won't just wait for the answer on Chaos Stone Island. They'll come up with other methods. They might even search for the ruins of the true dragon clan. That involves too many complications. We can just observe from afar, Mr. Dao said. Jushin nodded and hesitated for a moment. Mr. Dao, be careful. Other gentlemen in the building have realized that you have chosen the wrong path, and they are looking for opportunities to target you. Once the situation becomes clear, you might face many problems. If you can't overpower those who provoke you, it will greatly affect you. Do you need to secretly collect information in this regard? Mr. Dao looked at Jushin with a meaningful smile. Yes. Let's start collecting. That. There was a small island where the surroundings were quite ordinary, but the place carried a unique charm. Jiang Hao followed Hong Yuye and walked along the path. Senior, how do you find the scenery here? Jiang Hao asked softly. There weren't many people here. Although cultivators gathered here, they only stayed briefly. Occasionally, some news would leak out, but it took time to ask about it. On the way, people mentioned dragon blood. He surmised that many people on the ship had come for the ancestral dragon's heart. At the very least, the forces behind them had. As for Mi Ling Yu, she was not like them. She had come to report and find a way to escape from the Great Thousand God sect. Is it so difficult to leave the sect as an undercover agent? He couldn't say for sure. Jiang Hao didn't dare to think too much about it during the gathering. However, now that he was following Hong Yuye, he had to be cautious. If he got distracted and was discovered, it could easily lead to disaster. This is a cage, Hong Yuye suddenly said. Cage? Jiang Hao was surprised. Underneath. There should be something imprisoned here, Hong Yuye said and lowered her head. Jiang Hao was astonished. He tried to find some clues in the surroundings. But he found nothing. Was it because he hadn't studied the nameless manual enough? At that moment, Hong Yuye spoke. Sometimes, you don't necessarily have to look down. You need to learn to look up. Look up. Jiang Hao looked up. The bright sky showed no signs of change. The blue sky and white clouds were no different from the usual. But after watching for a long time, the white clouds seemed to change subtly as if other auras were gathering and dispersing there. However, this gathering and dispersing were common when spiritual energy was condensed. It was not strange. What could be imprisoned here? He asked instinctively. Overseas is vast, and the ocean floor is beyond the sight of the cultivation world, Hong Yuye said. She didn't say much, but Jiang Hao remembered this place. It was Nine Falling Island. The two walked along the path and admired the scenery. Xiao Li hasn't gone out of the sect for a long time, said Hong Yuye suddenly. Jiang Hao felt nervous. He was unsure of Hong Yuye's intentions. Occasionally, I ask Cheng Cho to take her out to pay respects to her parents, said Jiang Hao. Hong Yuye stopped and looked at the person beside her. Don't you take her out of the sect sometimes? I've attracted a lot of attention, and it's dangerous for Xiao Li to follow me, Jiang Hao said. You're smiling San Sheng, aren't you? Do you need to be so cautious? Hong Yuye smiled. Jiang Hao was stunned. That's only a disguise for outsiders. Hong Yuye looked at him calmly. In the end, she didn't say anything more. She continued walking forward. Jiang Hao followed but planted a ring in a hidden place. They would soon enter Chaos Stone Island, and he needed to be prepared. In the afternoon, Jiang Hao and Hong Yuye returned to the large ship. Before long, the ship set sail again. This time, when they docked, there were more people on the ship, but their mood was low. After all, they had witnessed smiling San Sheng murdering someone as soon as he came out of his room. No one was happy about that. Chapter 612, Chapter 612, Everyone has the right to choose. Chapter 612, Everyone has the right to choose. After retrieving the storage treasure from Ran Hui, Jiang Hao returned to his room. He looked around to make sure everything was fine before taking out the storage treasure. He wanted to check how many spirit stones were inside. Previously, he hadn't taken it out because he thought Hong Yuye would say something, and he would have had to discard the storage treasure. So, he left it with Ran Hui to clean the storage treasure and safeguard it for him. He wasn't very rich, but there are quite a few books. There were only 7,636 spirit stones. There was only one type of pill, and it was one he hadn't seen before. There was a good amount of it, though. It's not a healing pill, nor a cultivation-enhancing one, so it shouldn't be worth much. The books seem unusual. Jiang Hao took out one of the books, which read, The 8 Wonders of Floral Formations. Is this about formations? Jiang Hao felt a bit disappointed. He didn't study formations. However, he could take a look at it anyway. If it was highly advanced, he might be able to sell it for a good price. As he flipped it open, Jiang Hao's brows furrowed. A few pages later, his pupils dilated in astonishment. He closed the book and looked around. Once he saw that no one was nearby, he breathed a sigh of relief. However, he didn't dare to read any further. He was afraid that Hong Yuye would suddenly appear behind him. He had a subconscious feeling that it might be much safer to read it after he activated the Heavenly Cauldron. He then looked at the other books, the classic of the Pure Woman, Scenes of Love and Lust, the Union of Yin and Yang in 6 volumes, and so on. Jiang Hao set all the books aside and fell into deep thought. He didn't know how to handle them for a moment. Should he burn them? It would be a pity to do so. Should he sell them? How would he even go about selling them? Should he keep them? He was afraid of being discovered. After much hesitation, Jiang Hao made a decision. I'll seal them. He used the universe in a palm technique and sealed the books in a purple sphere in his hand. He decided to find a suitable place to exchange the books for spirit stones later. After that, Jiang Hao turned his attention to the pills. He appraised them. Soon, he received feedback from his divine ability. It was a pill meant to be used in conjunction with the content of the books. Its effects were quite wild. For a moment, he couldn't help but wonder if this pill would be effective for him. Finally, he sealed the pills too. He planned to sell them later. Only one question remained. What identity should he use to sell them? Smiling San Sheng was not this kind of person. Should he sell it as himself? That didn't seem like a good idea. The fan could change into different forms, so there was a chance he could use another disguise. Finally, he focused on the gains from the spirit stones. Adding to what he already had, there were 38,000 spirit stones. He still had some items on him that hadn't been sold yet. Once they were sold, he would have around 80,000. I'm getting rich. Jiang Hao stored everything and began to study the fourth form of the heavenly blade, no regrets. The more he studied it, the deeper his understanding of the 7 forms of heavenly blade became. The blade intent in his eyes also grew stronger. When he unleashed his blade again, its power would reach new heights. 5 days later, the ship docked again. This time, Jiang Hao and Hong Yuye stood on the deck and enjoyed the scenery. Nobody paid attention to Ran Hui anymore. That day, the ship set sail again. After that, they crossed the endless sea fog. It wasn't clear which direction they were headed. They couldn't even see the sea ahead. There was thunder in the sky. If not for the large ship, few people could traverse this area. The whole experience was disorienting. 3 days later, the large ship passed through the sea fog and arrived in a calm sea with clear skies. We've finally arrived. A few days later than expected. On the deck, someone sighed. It's probably because of smiling San Sheng. He disrupted the plans of many people. Let's not mention him. Just talking about him makes me afraid that he'll kill another. Others nodded. Despite smiling San Sheng's gentle front, he could kill someone in the next second. He was truly unpredictable. To say that his temperament was strange would not be an understatement. Standing on the deck, Mi Lingyu also sighed. In the end, she didn't approach smiling San Sheng because she couldn't understand his intentions. The danger was too high, and she didn't dare take the risk. Madam, these people are all here for dragon's blood. Should we get involved? Asked a maid. No, that is not our purpose. There's no need to take risks. Mi Lingyu shook her head. The ship docked. Let's go. Mi Lingyu took flight on her sword. Upon reaching the shore, many people flew toward the central part of the island. That was the destination of their journey. Because of smiling San Sheng, they had to get there ahead of time. Otherwise, it might cause trouble. At this moment, Jiang Hao arrived at the deck. He turned to Ran Hui and his wife and whispered, "Shall we go together?" Ran Hui, who had been waiting to disembark, was stunned. He quickly helped his wife up and nodded in response. Hong Yuye walked alongside Jiang Hao and didn't say anything. It seemed that she never interfered with Jiang Hao's actions or decisions. "Thank you, immortal elder," Ran Hui said gratefully. He knew that without the person in front of him, he and his wife would have died long ago. "Did you come here to escape or cure your wife?" asked Jiang Hao. "Cure her." Ran Hui was surprised. His wife seemed anxious. "Even changing her appearance won't help," said a faint voice. At that moment, Hong Yuye suddenly reached out and pulled down the woman's robe. The woman was frightened. She held on to Ran Hui tightly and bowed her head to try to avoid being seen. However, Jiang Hao still saw her. Her face was full of scars. There was even a burn mark on the cheek. "It seems you've indeed tried many methods," Jiang Hao said. He remained calm. He wasn't affected because of the poison. His state of mind helped a great deal too. "But it's useless," Ran Hui said helplessly. "I might have a way, but I don't know if it'll work. If it fails, there's a possibility you might end up dead," Jiang Hao said solemnly. "You can consider it. Before I leave, I will contact you again. The choice is up to you." Jiang Hao didn't linger. He indeed had a way, but there were things he couldn't foresee. As for whether they were willing, that depended on the two people. If they were willing, it was a small effort on his part. If they weren't, he wouldn't bother with it. Everyone had the right to choose, but everyone also had to bear the consequences of their choices. On the ship, Li watched smiling San Sheng leave with a slight frown. The arrival of the person could easily affect his position on the island. "Will smiling San Sheng's audacity affect this trade?" a middle-aged man behind him asked. "This is Chaos Stone Island. Once there's trouble, someone will handle it naturally. But take a few people and inform them that this is our place for external trade. Advise him to be less aggressive. Taking a loss isn't a big deal. The overall situation is what matters," Li said. "The big picture is important. No matter who it is, we have to be patient. We can indeed suppress him." The middle-aged man nodded. "For safety's sake, Take the Island Master's token with you, Lee said. The middle-aged man was delighted. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.